And good evening. Welcome to Now You See TV. I'm your host, Jake Grant, and tonight we have an amazing show for you. We're joined by Nathaniel Kuetchenberg. How you doing, Nathaniel?
Oh, yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you.
Awesome. Tonight's topic is Nathaniel's adventures in the Promised Land, his book that he recently came out. What's the name of your book, Nathaniel?
Okay, so the title was originally As Jesus Walked, the Four Gospels in One. I've done a lot of editing, a lot of updating over the past 5 years. I've now renamed it The Synchronized Gospel 4 in 1. It's the same book. It's just updated, but
awesome. Now, Nathaniel, you have a fascination in the Middle East, and of course, I'm going to ask you to kind of tell us about yourself, so our audience can get acquainted with you. And of course, we're also going to be talking a little bit about your interest in archaeology and your interest in the work of Ron Wyatt. So we have a lot of interesting topics we're going to be covering tonight, guys. And so I'm happy to invite Nathaniel to go ahead and start to share about who he is and what has brought him to have these adventures in the Promised Land and to eventually write that book that he was talking about. All right. So Nathaniel, tell us about yourself.
Okay, yeah. So anyways, I better start and give you a bit of my history. So as you can see, my name is Nathanael Kuetchenberg, and I'm 20 years old right now. I'll be 21 in a few months. I was born and raised not too far away in northwestern Indiana. And as a little kid, my parents were, their parents were like Baptist and Catholic and German Lutheran, kind of a mixture of everything. So it wasn't like I was a denomination, but I grew up and I believed in Jesus. I believed in the church doctrine. We went to church on Sunday. And we were just keeping the doctrines and the religion of our ancestors, as well as we could. And so at that point in time, it was August the 14th of 2008. I was 11 and a half years old. And I was homeschooled all the way up through high school. I was homeschooled. And at this point in time, my mom decided to start to teach me biblical Greek. And so that's what I did. And I was already kind of learning Chinese. You can see I got a picture of myself at 11. Some Chinese, that was Chinatown. And you can see I was very creative, sewed my own costumes, quite the 11-year-old, really. And that was when I started learning Greek. It was very young, and I didn't even start. It was, hey, Andrew, teach me some Greek is the curriculum that I used. And I started on the 3rd level. So she writes it so you could start a kid off at like 5 or 6. But I was 11, started at level 3. And let's see, I got another slide here to show that you could think, 11, what can you possibly teach an 11-year-old, especially Greek? Like, they barely know English. But this on the screen, I got in the beginning was the word in arche analogous, kalogos, in prostanthon, kathos, analogous. I could, read that and parse every word when I was 11. That from 11 to 12, it was the grammar, nominative, genitive, accusative, dative, vocative, all the grammar. That's what I learned when I was 11. And it stuck with me the rest of my life. And at that age, of 11, I was reading in the Greek and studying Greek, homeschooling. And at that time, I also started reading the King James Version of the Bible. And when I was reading the King James, I had read through all the books of the Kings and the Chronicles. And then I went to the New Testament. And it was, I guess, almost 9 years ago, January 9th, 2009, that I was reading through the story of the rich young ruler. And when I read it, I was thinking, it's in 3 Gospels. It's in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And how come they're different? Like, Matthew will say a few things that Mark says and some that it doesn't say. And it doesn't, it all goes together. It's the same story, but they say it different ways. And this just intrigued me. So I had my fingers in 3 different places, 11 years old, and I was trying to read them all together, trying to say every word in chronological order, one after another. And I was just doing it for fun. Later on, I even got on the computer and I started, typing it out a little bit just from the King James, not from Greek or anything. But that's how involved I was. 11 years old, I was trying to really get these Gospels in order. The only thing I knew was, some chronological, you get the books that give you the like synopsises, and you just put them all together. I would just try to read them like that, and then afterward, we would use Alexander Scorby, and our family we would actually like go through Matthew and Mark and Luke. And when Alexander read in Mark, I would try to follow along in Luke, or if he read in Luke, I'd follow along in Matthew or John. Yeah. And I really tried to get this all in order.
Yeah, that's super cool. The whole idea that there are multiple perspectives recorded in the Gospels and in Scripture, and like the whole idea that you could synchronize them up is just fascinating. I remember thinking about that process as a kid. I was like, what was the point of them recording it multiple times? Because we get the story, but it's just fascinating because there's more details about the ministry that kind of come out in the different perspectives, and so it was always interesting to me as well. The whole idea of how the Gospels, they seem to line up, and they each had some different perspectives on the same kind of timeline. So please continue.
So basically, I was thinking the same thing. I mean, I was 11 years old, and later on, I realized that a lot of kids think the same thing. I mean, when I think I was like 17 years old, I met a 10-year-old boy, and he said that he had thought about the same thing. He wanted to know how the Gospels went together, and so I gave him a free copy of my book. I have a policy that any kid that wants to have my book, I give it away to them for free. And I classify kid, under 18, basically. And a few adults too. I just give it away for free because I think it's really important to get this out there. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So, now I have this book published. It's 5 editions, but back then it wasn't, I didn't even dream I would write a book or anything like that. I was just 11. But then the next big step was actually it was just a couple months later, May 4th, 2009. And that was the date when a guest speaker came to our small little town in North Judson, Indiana. And his name, as many of you have heard this guy before, his name is Michael Rood. And Michael Rood, he came in person live, and he wanted to present this Jonah Code. And I was just fascinated by his calendar, by everything, by the 3 days and 3 nights. And it was just fantastic. It was fascinating. And I was 12 years old, and my family, we could say we had a rude awakening. Okay. I don't go for Michael Rood on half of what he teaches, but as far as just getting out of the church, keeping the Sabbath, keeping the feasts, the basic, Hebrew roots movement, I would say that it was May 4th, 2009 that really started a process for me keeping the Sabbath, and for my brother and a lot of my family, that it started something. And it was okay. So it was for the next 3 years that we kept a Sabbath fellowship at our house, and we didn't have a big fellowship, maybe like 3 or 4 people would come, occasionally 10 or 12, but it was just a small fellowship. A few people kept Sunday too, but just a little small fellowship, Northwestern Indiana. And it was over those few years, I learned a lot more Greek. I was able to read, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Revelation, Acts, Romans, basically the entire New Testament in Greek. I knew, all the cases. I could parse every word. I had all the analytical lexicons and concordances and everything necessary to make my own translations. And I decided at 15 years old that I really wanted to make my own chronology, because from listening to Michael Rood, and he had a chronological gospel he worked on, I decided it was about 2010, 2011, I decided I really'd like to see his gospel, but I do not believe it'd be 100% accurate. I could tell that my Greek that I had studied since I was a little kid, I would say it's a lot better than Michael Rood's. I don't want to say, I don't know how well Michael Rood studied Greek, but I just know, a lot of people that think they know Greek, they don't. And for me, I could read the entire New Testament in Greek, and I do not believe that Michael Rood has a good translation. And they're just little things here and there, that I just don't agree with him on. So I decided to start from scratch and to make my own. And
And of course, we love Michael Rood and the people over there at a Rood Awakening Ministries.
Oh
And
yeah, and I do too.
We're all welcome to differing opinions, of course. And here on Now You See TV, we welcome people with different positions and different areas of research, and so it's very cool that you have another perspective on compiling the chronological Gospels, similar to how Michael had a passion to put them together himself.
Yeah, and that is also how I'd like to use it, especially in this, Hebrew roots Messianic movement, that I don't want to try to make division and say you could either go for Michael Rood's chronological gospel or go for mine. I want to be like William Tyndale that came out and said, hey, look, I got a New Testament from the Greek. This is a great New Testament. And, John Wycliffe already had a New Testament out there. They're both in English, but it's the same thing, just another witness, another person did the same thing. And that's what I see myself, that I to this day, 2018, I've never held a copy of Michael Rood's book in my hand. I've never read his book. I know a little bit of what he taught, but as far as the research in my book, it's totally independent. And that's what I hope that it can be used as, to show that some of these things that I found, Michael Rood also found independently. So to go ahead and continue the story about my book, it was, March 14th, 2013. That was when I actually finished the rough draft. I had spent almost a year working, and I had worked, 200 hours a month, and I was keeping track, and it was actually crazy because I was still, volunteering at World Missionary Press once a week on Thursdays, volunteering at a nursing home once a week on Wednesdays, still doing my, college level Hebrew, high school level math and science and all that stuff, at the same time working 200 hours on this book. And when I say 200 approximately, I actually timed myself 200 hours a month that I had spent working for almost a year. So it was quite a relief to have this done. But at the same time, after my rough draft was done, it took me another 6 months to work out all the little details of proofreading. I had, my cousin that was a doctor in theology. She was Catholic even, and she proofread it. She gave me advice. She gave me, tons of letters, a lot of advice. She really helped me because, I'm 16 writing this book. And then she's like, I don't know how old she was, like 80 or something. And she's a doctor. She knew what she was doing. She gave me a lot of advice. I also talked a lot of things over with a professor down in Louisville, Kentucky. That's a Hebrew professor. Of course, he studied Greek. His name is Russell T. Fuller. He gave me a lot of advice too, and helped me on a few little details and, how to critique some things. So my first edition was successfully published in January. It ended up that my publisher went bankrupt. It's kind of a weird story, but it went bankrupt. I kind of was on my own. I had to do it all by myself, get just printed and bound. Limited edition, and I say limited because it was 12 copies. Okay, 12 copies, limited edition, September 2014. And then my third edition was like 75. Actually, it was about 100 copies, 2015. And then 2016, it was unprinted, just a PDF. And that's what I'm going off of now to do a final. I'm hoping, this next edition will be more like a finale version, which would be my 5th edition. And that's coming. This edition should be ready by sometime this fall, about September of 2018. And I'm pretty sure, okay, we are still selling the first edition. And I will make that clear to the audience too, that I have about approximately 150 copies available on Amazon on my first edition. So if you'd like to see like the history of where I started to where I've come now, the first edition is still available, and I'll be having this next edition very soon in the next few months. Okay, and next, I want to give a background because I'm going to be going through some details of my book, just explaining a little bit about the chronology, the translation, etc. And one thing I want to get started in my little introduction is just what the Hebrew name for Jesus is. And I'm not trying to start any kind of division by, You say Jesus, you say Yahushua, you say Yahashua, you say Yeshua, Yahshua, and all these different versions. I don't think that that's going to send you to heaven or hell. Okay, this is not the hugest issue on the planet, or not even planet. Sorry, I'm a flat earther, but I still slip every now and then on the face of the earth. It's not the biggest issue on the face of the earth, but I do want to go into detail just because I have done a lot of studying about the name. And so please don't take offense. I'm just doing this so you know where I come from and why I say it the way I say it. So the name Jesus is actually a transliteration of the Latin word Iesus, Jesus, which is a transliteration of the Greek, which is pronounced Jesus. And that word Jesus comes from a Hebrew word, and the Hebrew word is spelled it sounds like Yeshua or Yehoshua. It is Yod, and then there's the Seireh, and then Sheen, Shurek, and then Ayin with the Ketef Patach in it. That didn't show up on the screen. I don't have the right font. And that is the name Yeshua. And as far as, you go back 2,000 years, 4,000 years till now, I do not believe there's been any changes as far as, Yeshua going to anything else. There has been differences in the way the letters look. There's differences in the way the dots and dashes looked, but the actual name has stayed Yeshua. That hasn't changed. And I do have something that just intrigues me. So I'm going to pull up, it's the Gospel of Philip. And I can't say, the gospel. I'm not trying to give the Gospel of Philip any credit, but I do have the Gospel of Philip on the screen because I want to show you a Greek word. I'm sorry I don't have it in English or anything, but I have my cursor on it if you want to switch the screen. Hold on, I got to turn my PowerPoint off. I bet you. Yes, okay. So where my cursor is, that right there is Greek, and it says Yeshua. And then again, underneath it says Yeshua. That is actually the Greek Gospel of Philip, and that's how they spell Jesus, which is normally looks like Jesus, but in the Greek Gospel of Philip, which was one of those that the Council in Nicaea kicked out, maybe for good cause, maybe not. I still got a lot of studying on that issue that I haven't even gone down, but only for the purpose of the name Yeshua. I'm using this for demonstrative purposes, that it has, that even some Greek texts put it in the gospel as the equivalent of Yeshua, Yeshua, that there was a reason for the Jesus. The Greek doesn't have a sheen. It doesn't have a sh sound. So they had to put the sigma. So it would be Yeshua. And then in Greek, the aleph looks like a feminine word. So they just flipped that around to an omicron sigma, made it masculine, and get Jesus. It did not have anything to do with, trying to purposely mess up or deceive people. That was just a Greekified way of saying Yeshua. So, there's no curses on people that say Jesus or Jesus or anything like that. It's just, it's a translation. I prefer to use the original just because that is the original, and I say Yeshua. So, but again, I do not believe this is a huge, huge issue. Again, the next thing it's really important to me is just the name of our Father. That the Heavenly Father's name is Yehovah. And I have here the Aleppo Codex, a snapshot of it. For those of you that don't read Hebrew, I got it in red there. That says Yod He Vav He, and it has the vowels marked out, Yehovah. And what's so crazy about this is that in the Masoretic text, if you just buy a Masoretic text in Hebrew and you look up this verse, Ezekiel, I think what is it, two or three something, I don't have the verse number there. If you look that up in the Masoretic text, it'll be pointed out Yod with the schwa, the two dots under it, hey, and then there will be no vowel. It'll just say Yod, schwa, hey, and then it'll do a vav with the komets, the long komets, and a hey. So it'll look like it's pronounced ya, and then hey, and then va, and it's not pronounceable. If you're reading Hebrew, every time you get to yod hey vav hey, anywhere in the whole entire Tanakh, you cannot pronounce yod hey vav hey. It is unpronounceable. But there are several places, and I want to give Nehemiah Gordon the credit for, leading me to study this deeper myself, because Nehemiah, he was the one that inspired me. And then from him, I've taken it up and I've gone back to the text online to prove it myself. I don't just believe whatever anybody says. I take it to the Hebrew, look it up, and it says Yehovah. In the Masoretic text, it says Yehovah. And also, there's another place in Ezekiel that says Adonai Yehovah. And I just think it's amazing because most of the time, if it says Adonai, you think it should say Elohim. So it'd be Adonai, Yod Hey, nothing, and then Vav, and then there should be a Hirek, the I sound. But instead of it having the long Hirek, it'll say Adonai Yehovah, and it actually puts it in. That whoever penned this actually put in Yehovah. And there's over like 50 or 60 texts. These are like 1,000-year-old texts. I'm not talking about something, penned yesterday. This was penned 800 or 900 AD. Different texts vary. This is the Damascus Crown, Deuteronomy 6:4. It actually says, Shema Yisrael, Yehovah Eloheinu, Yehovah Echad, V'ahavta Yehovah, and it goes on and so forth. It says here, Yisrael, Yehovah Eloheinu, Yehovah is one. And there are several people, here and there that have their own theories of how, well, maybe 1,000 years ago they said Yehovah, but before that they said something else. The Babylonians may have messed it up. Well, again, I have a text. This is Babylonian with vowel points, and it excites me because I want to know the correct way. Okay, if you want to say it somewhere else, I'm not gonna beat you up over it. We can still be friends. If you want to say one way, I say the other. I am not trying to beat anybody up. But as far as for myself, I want to know how to say his name. I think it's important for myself to know how to say the Father's name. And when I see this in Babylonian Hebrew, it actually says Adonai Yehovah. And Babylonian Hebrew doesn't even have the same vowels. Babylonian Hebrew has 6 vowels. The Masoretes had 7. Okay, they have 2 different numbers of vowels. They look different. They're written on top instead of on the bottom and in between. And this also says Yehovah. So enough about that. I just want to make it clear that when I say Yehovah, I say Yeshua, that I've done my own research. This is my personal belief. I believe it's the correct. I'm not going to beat anybody up for saying anything else, but that is the way I say it.
I would love to put you in contact with Dr. Pigeon and see you guys. I'd love to debate it. See you guys discuss some of these translation things. I think that would be very beneficial to you and to him, and it would just be a really cool conversation to watch. But because of course we have people on who pronounce names differently based on their own research, and of course you need to study yourself to be approved. We're not sacred namers. You don't have to say it a certain way to be a true believer. And if you are saying it in a way that somebody considers wrong, we're not going to look at you as idolatrous for not agreeing with how we pronounce the name. So we want to be very careful on ICTV not to be sacred namers. We just think it's a very valuable thing to study into how originally the name of the Messiah, Yeshua, was pronounced, because it can only be beneficial to learn more about how the ancient Semitic peoples pronounced and spoke. And so it's just a value intellectually to learn that stuff. And of course, people say Jesus, and it's just as powerful because miracles have been done in the name, because it's who the name represents. But why not get back to the original is our viewpoint. So anyways, please continue, Nathaniel.
So yeah, as far as the name and all that, I just think it's beneficial for myself. I want to have some kind of root. Okay, this is why I say it. Of course, if there was a change back in the Middle Ages, we can't really say, because, we don't have any tape recorder that, this is a tape recorder from the time and Yeshua says Yeshua, and that's how it is. But as far as I just say that the best evidence we have leads me to believe it's Yeshua and it's Yehovah. And if there's any change, I'm not going to, I am willing to change my mind too. If I can see evidence for some change down the road, some historical document here and there, all for that. But that's the way I say it, and that's how I choose to have it in my book as well. So going on with my story. So this is a picture of me in Israel. This is my second time. And as you can see, I'm pretty young there. I was 17 and a half. You know, I had to have that half. It was my 17 and a half birthday when I flew over. Second time in Israel. And I have a little story about that because it was the lady on, let's see, my right, I guess it'd be your right too. It's her name's Karen, and she's a phenomenal prayer warrior. She has faith. Okay. And so when we went to Israel, we got our tickets and it had a flight stop in Rome. And this layover, you know, it was going to be 2 hours. And Karen tells me, Nathaniel, we got to believe God for a longer layover. And I was thinking, well, sure, you know, why not? You know, let's just pray and believe God. You know, there's no problem with that. Let's pray, believe God for a longer layover. And sure enough, we get to the airport. The layover's like 7 hours. Few of the Jews weren't too happy about that, especially when they knew that we prayed for it. So we had to be all hush hush. But turned out when we actually got to Rome, it was like an 8.5, 9 hour layover. Gave us a little more time. And we got to see Rome. So there I am, 17 and a half. You know, I've done a little bit of international travel before, but never been to Rome. Got to see Rome. It was just crazy. And we met a guy on the airplane. His picture's on the left. His name is Scott. He was on the airplane with us. He gave us a free ride in the taxi from the airport to the Coliseum area. Afterward, I gave him one of my 12 copies of my second edition of my book for free. He gave me a donation. I think it was like 89 euros or something crazy. He's like, you're going to need this. You're in Rome. And we had some money. We just made the day. So I want to give that testimony just to those people out there that, you know, our Father in heaven, Yehovah, he does impossible things. And I just never can get over just the whole entire situation. You know, we were just going to get there 2 hours, never leave the airport. And due to faith, just believing, and, you know, it's not like we did any, you know, nuances or anything magical. All we did is we just prayed, you know, let's believe, you know, that's all we did. We didn't, you know, say any certain prayer or do any certain thing. We just said we'll believe. And that's what happened. But anyway, my presence in Israel, that time I was over there for over a month. And I'm giving you this background just so you know, I've been to Israel. Again, this is my second time. My first time was more of a short time term with my family. I was over there for a concert that my friend, her name is Esther, she wrote a oratorio called Ahava Mitgala. And Ahava Mitgala means love revealed. And they're all messianic prophecies of Mashiach. And they're all from the Tanakh. It's an Orthodox choir that she had singing it at first. And she's had combinations, you know, some Orthodox, some Messianic singers, and even sang it in the YMCA one time in a German Lutheran church with Orthodox singers still. So, you know, she's all out going for music to glorify Yehovah and to glorify the Mashiach, Yeshua. You can see this is another picture. I got myself Starbucks Bethlehem. This was not a real Starbucks. And I mean, you know, there might be some kind of pagan gods related to that or what, but I know that these guys didn't really care about that. They weren't actually even a Starbucks. They just put up their sign and put up their shop. They did not know what a Java chip was. They put a chocolate bar in a blender, blended me up a drink. It was weird. Okay. And so there's me, Nimrod's Fortress. You can just see, this is my presence in the land, touring around, 17 years old. That is my second trip. And from there, I'd like to go on to some more questions about my book, unless you wanted to.
Yeah, well, before we get into the book, you know, would you be interested in sharing a little bit more of your adventures in Israel?
Yeah, okay. We could get down that road.
Because you know, I've heard the story, guys, and for those of you who are tuning in right now and those in the future who might be watching this video, this is going to be very interesting because Nathaniel has an absolute love for archaeology and the country of Israel and the different things that are found there, and his passion for it is just unparalleled. It's awesome, and I really I was kind of egging him on to share this story, but I'm really excited to have him to say it on air. But go ahead, Nathaniel, tell us a little bit more about your adventures in Israel.
Yeah. Okay. So, my reluctance is just because I mean it's still a little bit crazy and everything because turns out not everything you anticipate to do in Israel turns out to go the way that you think it's going to go. And that's exactly what happened with some of my pursuits with archaeology, especially related to Ron Wyatt. And I think I might like to have a few pictures up here too, so I might want to skip ahead a tiny bit. So I talk about this at the same time as the pictures. Basically, that ever since 2008, I had I had a friend of mine. He's more or less my godfather. He's 81 years old now. You know, bless his heart. He loves the Torah. He loves studying just messianic prophecies and all that. And back in 2006, he was invited by a good friend of his to go to Israel with the Wyatt Archaeological Research. And the Wyatt Archaeological Research, they were over there and did a lot of digging. And some of the stuff that they were digging for was stuff that was found by the former Ron Wyatt. And I don't know. I mean, some of you might be more familiar than others. Ron Wyatt was an amateur archaeologist, but he spent a lot of money, a lot of time of his own savings to go over there, help out with archaeology, and ended up finding some really cool stuff. Like he's contributed for helping out with the Noah's Ark in Turkey, just getting evidence for that being the real Noah's Ark. Let's see with that. Let me actually bring up a picture. If I can get to that, he did a lot. I mean, the real Mount Sinai, Sodom and Gomorrah, you name it, that he just spent a lot of time. He trusted the Lord, and the Lord did miracles. Okay. So, let's see, I actually went too far. Oh wow! Now it's going crazy.
Well, Nathaniel, I didn't mean to throw you off. I apologize if I did. We can go back and go ahead through the order of your slides. I didn't mean to jump ahead if you were intended to get to the story later on.
No. Let's see. We could go down the story. I'll get into slides later on, maybe. But yeah, I'll continue with the story. Did you have any questions about that? Or
yeah, I just kind of wanted you to share your love and your fascination, because you're going on all these trips to Israel, and you're really involved. And so, what interest in archaeology did those trips spark in you, and how did you start living out that love for the different things that were in Jerusalem and in the old city and stuff like that?
So yeah, I mean, that was with archaeology. That is one thing that I decided to go, visit the Sodom and Gomorrah, the real one. I visited that quite a few times. And one of the archaeologists in Israel, he decided that we could, that he and I could work together, helping him with a dig in the city of David. And so we spent an afternoon one day just in the land, cleaning ancient pottery, basically, just wiping off the broken pieces and talking about Hezekiah's time period, where these pots came from. I'm not going to give the guy's name just because I don't think it's important, but this guy is one of the heads of the Israeli antiquities. He's in Jerusalem, and he and I, we're just talking and had a pretty good time just cleaning off the pottery. And the next day, I had really wanted to try to find the place where Ron Wyatt said that the Ark of the Covenant was. Okay, I know there's a lot of people that, they wholeheartedly, they believe Ron Wyatt. They think that he's definitely found the Ark. He found all these things. Why couldn't he found the Ark? So I believe that too. And so I wanted to make sure that I knew, to the best of my knowledge, where this was. And apparently there's some kind of a tunnel in some kind of a tunnel, from Zedekiah's cave or wherever to where Yeshua was crucified. And so I thought, maybe it wouldn't be too hard to find that out. Well, apparently it really wasn't too hard to find it out. But at the same time, I want me to go into that story now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, just, I mean, we can go ahead and expound on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll get more into Ron Wyatt later. I'll just go into the story of,
yeah, go ahead into your story on kind of some experiences you've had, when you first were getting into looking for some of the interesting things in Jerusalem. And then we can get into kind of Ron Wyatt later with your slides.
Sure. Yeah, I want to more like finish out with Ron Wyatt. But I mean, I have been very involved with Ron Wyatt, his stuff. I mean, I've met Richard Reeves a couple times. I mean, Kevin Fisher had a little bit of interaction with him, and a lot of people that are related to Ron Wyatt, people that, just different people here and there, all that agree are on the same track, been over there doing a lot of digs. And because I've got these connections, that's what I talked about, this archaeologist who I'm not going to name, but the guy that's in Israel, he's one of the heads of antiquities for Israel. And he was the one helping me out. And he decided, that I could clean off some pottery. Well, that was great. Well, the next day I was over there and I was told that, this guy, that if I was ever in any trouble, like I'd ever get into trouble, that never happens to me. And I'm not being sarcastic. It really doesn't. I never really get into trouble. But if ever I get into trouble, that this guy, he's experienced, he could help me out, anything that could happen. I mean, he would be there to help me out. And so I was glad to know that. But turned out that I was, trying to find this tunnel in this cave, trying to find this place that led to the Ark of the Covenant, because I was told that it was, right there, open for anybody to walk through. You just got to know where it's at, be there at the right time, and voila, you go right in, see the Ark of the Covenant. I thought it was as easy as that. But turns out when I get there, I found that there is there's a plaster wall that covered it up. There's a man-made wall. They covered it up. And it made sense, because I heard the story too, that there was, a few guys that went down there and they all died. And the Israeli government didn't want anybody going down there, so they wanted to block it all up so nobody else would go down there and die. So, I mean, I was all fine with that. But at the same time, I thought that was a great spot to be. I mean, a great place to just be in the presence of Yehovah, pray, whatever. And, if it was the will of Yehovah, that maybe I could go down and see the Ark of the Covenant. So I would just, stay in there, seeing if maybe that would happen. Well, turns out that I had my timing off a little bit, because that in Israel, it's not like America, that in Israel, everything closes extremely early. Like the post office might close at 2:00 in the afternoon, or it might, a restaurant might close down, maybe 2 or 3 o'clock or something. And it turned out this place that I was in, that it closed down at 4 o'clock. I don't know why it closed down at 4 o'clock. It didn't have a time on the brochure. And I mean, to tell the truth, I asked at a later date what time they closed. They said 4:30. But anyway, it was 4 o'clock sharp. They ended up closing it all up, shut the lights off, and they locked the gates. Well, I was still down there having my little quiet time with Yehovah and the angels and all the presence of the Lord. I didn't know anything about it until, they locked the gates up, closed me in, and, they went off to, tell their kids hi or whatever. So, so there I was, left in the dark, down in the cave, in a cold, damp, dark cave. And I was like, okay, well, this is kind of interesting. So I just waited down there for a while. I was hoping that, I might get some phone signal, might be able to call my friend, because he'd probably have a key to the door. Because I was like, what, this is kind of a bad place to be, but at least I know people in charge. So I thought, at least I know whoever's in charge of this probably has the key. I give a call and it gives me this message in Hebrew, and I'm like, oh, I know what that means. It means that I'm out of minutes on my phone. So that was one shame. And then the gates, that was another problem, that when they lock those gates in Israel, they're locked tight, and there's a lot of soldiers that just like to just hang around and sit down there. And I was thinking like, okay, if I went up there and I'm like, hey, help get me out of there. I didn't want any soldier to like turn around and shoot me because I thought I was like, a zombie or a guy with a gun or crazy guy. Who knows what? So I'm like, and in Israel, they shoot first, ask questions later. I didn't want to get shot. So I thought the smartest thing to do was to go at the emergency exit. I've gone out this a couple times on accident just because, oh, this is the exit. Found out, oh, it's the emergency exit. Well, it didn't set off any alarm or anything. It was just an exit and it just said emergency. That's how it is in Israel. They just, say emergency. It's not really like an alarm or anything. So I thought, okay, I'll try that door. So, I mean, this all took several hours really to get all this worked out. Finally, I went out to get out the gate one time and it was stuck. And I thought, oh, maybe they locked it. It's never been locked before, but I tried a little harder, waited like an hour or two, tried again. And I got it open maybe about this much. And I was like, okay, that's enough to get my head through and maybe my legs through, but I'm not going to fit through that. And I realized that somebody, and this is how Israel is for you, some idiot put, a couple 100,000, well, not 100,000 pounds, but definitely a few hundred pounds, maybe 500 or more pounds of wires and coils and just random stuff right there blocking the emergency exit. So I couldn't get out of the emergency exit either. So that was something that just blew my mind. I'm like, oh, there's Israel for you. Somebody actually gets stuck and the emergency exit won't even work. So instead of panicking like I know most people have done, I'm just like, well, that's how it is. I know that all things work together for good. So I just had to deal with it. So I'm like, well, there's got to be a reason for me to be down in this cave. So I'll just go down here, take a nap. It's midnight, 2:00 in the morning. I'll just go to sleep. Well, I didn't sleep too long because it was cold and, I could only get a few hours sleep at a time. I mean, not really cold, but like maybe 55, 60 degrees Fahrenheit, that is. And 6:00 in the morning, I remember it was 6:00 sharp. The gates open, workers come in and they're just speaking Arabic a mile a minute. And I'm like, oh, praise the Lord, praise Jehovah. I'm out of here. I'm free. So I'm like, well, that's great. So I go up and I was getting ready to have a wonderful time trying to catch my flight that left in an hour and 45 minutes, which just isn't going to happen. But,
so real quick before you go on, you're in this cave that you were looking for some biblical, ancient artifacts. And you have an entire night that you get locked into this tourist location, really, underground in a cave. And you have the entire night to yourself in a location, very possibly that you believe that the Ark of the Covenant is. Did you look around any for the entrance to any secret tunnels or look around for any artifacts? What'd you do while you were there that night?
Oh, well, there's definitely a few places I could have got myself killed. But yeah, I mean, when I was getting a little cold, so I walked around. I mean, the whole place. I mean, I've been in the whole cave before, and my friends know that. I mean, technically, there's a little sign that says "Asumeyeva," which means like don't go there. But in Israel, I mean, who cares if it says don't go there? It's like, oh, that's for the that's for the tourists not to go there or whatever. I mean, that's just the mindset they have over there. So I when I'm in Israel, I do as the Israelis. I don't really, I don't watch those signs that say Sumevo. So, I mean, I went around the whole cave, and that's, what probably anybody would have done anyways. So, I mean, I know the place like the back of my hand, but to say the whole cave, it gets very small, especially after you're there for a few hours. It's not that big.
Did you happen to find anything cool while you were in there that night?
Cool. I mean, let's see. Actually, if you call this cool, I have a little piece that actually broke. I have it super glued together. I have, let's see if I get my microphone out of the way. Found a little piece of pottery here. Actually, this was not that certain times. I think this was a couple of years prior to that. Same place, same location. That's about the closest I got to finding treasure. Well, actually, hold on. Yeah, maybe that was a year before. But, I found a piece of pottery. I have another little piece of pottery that I found too. So it turned out, I mean, there's just a few pieces of pottery lying on the ground, basically worthless. I mean, Israel keeps all that stuff for the historical value, but I mean, they got like thousands and millions of little tiny pieces of pottery. The only ones really valuable are if you got like a handle of a pot or like the rim of a pot or a jar or anything like that. But the tiny little pieces, I mean, nobody really cares about them. That's why they're just lying on the floor. So I picked them up and I was like, you know what? I mean, I could keep these, or if the Israelis want them, and they got like basically they got entire rooms stuffed with these, literally stuffed with these little things, the shards. So like, if they want them, I'd hand them over. If they didn't, I'd just keep them because, that's how they are. A lot of times they don't care if a few people keep them here or there.
So it sounds to me like your adventures in Israel and this experience, looking through caves, looking for artifacts, looking for the Ark of the Covenant, you were living out an Indiana Jones type experience in Israel, which I think is fascinating, and kind of demonstrates, your passion for, going after, what mysteries could we uncover? And unfortunately, I guess, that night in the cave, you didn't find any super cool, but kind of a funny story that you got locked in there overnight. So that morning, what happened?
Okay, yes. So that morning, I got my little show and tell for my little tiny piece of pottery. I did pick this one up. The night I was trapped in there. Okay, so this is basically lying on the floor right by this doorway, the supposed doorway to the Ark of the Covenant. Okay, I've never gone down there. It's blocked up. Okay, but to tell the truth, if I had a pickaxe or a sledgehammer, I could have busted it down. But I'm not going that far. I'd had to get permission for all that stuff. But as far as where it's at, there's a little bit. There are, I think, 3 or 4 other ones. At least these little guys of pottery. I just shoved them in a backpack. Didn't think much of it, and that was all that I found. But morning comes. At 6 o'clock, everything, opens up for the day. And I'm like, oh, great. 6 o'clock, I'm home free. My flight was leaving in an hour and 40 minutes. I'm like, you know what? I'm missing my flight, but maybe we'll get on the next flight. That's what I was hoping. And yeah, I was that stupid really to get stuck there the night before my flight left. I did not try to do this. Okay. As much as some people might, wonder, okay, did you just, try to get stuck there? No, my flight left the next day. So totally a mistake. But what happened from there is that there was, the Arabs, they come in, they're going to do set up for some meeting, probably with the Masons or something. They set up for a meeting. Oh, and they're just laughing and they're like, what do? You get stuck down there? Do you sleep or you get cold, sir? And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I got to catch my flight. But I did something that I realized I probably shouldn't have done in retrospect. I had my passport, my U.S. passport out in my hand. I was trying to show these people, hey, look, I'm a tourist. Well, the boss guy, even though everybody else just thought it was a funny joke, they're like, oh, you got stuck there. I was basically ready to just walk out, get my stuff and go. Well, the boss guy's like, hey, no, sir. And he just takes his hand and grabs my passport before I could even think twice. Okay. I was not expecting him to grab my passport. Just grabs my passport. He's like, hold on, wait, sir, let's get the police. And I'm like, wait, the police? Why would the police? Well, I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever. Let's wait for the police. So I just sat there. And the funny thing about this whole thing, Israel, it's just another place because 6 o'clock in the morning, these guys come. The guy snatches my passport. I look at my watch. It was exactly 6 a.m. They tell me, sit down. Let's wait for the police. The police don't show up until 7:30 or 7:35. And I'm like, okay, well, that's great. They're across the street and they take an hour and a half. So shows what kind of schedule they are on. And then from there, it got you the, well, it took another couple minutes, well, when the police guy arrived, he's like, okay, what is this? And he's like, okay, well, that's great. Let's check you out. So he gave me back my passport and we decided, to go to the police station. I rode in the car for the little block or whatever. just in the back seat, nothing like, no handcuffs, nothing like that. Just friendly little ride. We went to the police station and went in to the station and just talked about what had happened. Wanted to make sure I documented all this. I would have been fine not documenting it, but if it's going to be documented, got to get my side of the story in. And so I'm there, and I tell them, hey, I was a stupid American. I got stuck in the cave. That's all I could say because, that's what's true. I told them it was stupid American to get stuck in the cave. And they're like, okay. And so they finally got it. They're like, okay, so then you say you're a stupid American, you get stuck in cave. I said, yes, exactly. You got it. Stupid American gets stuck in cave. Well, it kept going on and on for a little while, and they didn't really know what to think about it. So they dump out my backpack, look through a bunch of stuff. They found out I actually had 10 flashlights. I mean, they were like, you got the Roche Panas, all these flashlights, okay? All these flashlights in my butt. They're like, why do you need all these flashlights? So they're thinking Indiana Jones is what they're thinking. They're like, you got these flashlights. Oh, and I think I had a rope and all these rubber bands. They're like, what do you do with rubber bands, sir? I was not about to tell them those were in my backpack from college. And actually, I used them at home to rubber band my socks before I wash them at night. So that's why they're in my backpack. But anyway, they go through all these stuff in there and they're like, what is this? And they see this shirt that I pulled out. It was one of my costumes. I was using it for a YouTube video I was on. And I had a Crusaders costume. They're like, what is this? Or what is it? I said, it's for Purim. They're like, Zele Purim? They're like, it's for Purim. That doesn't make any sense. They're like, why would a Jew that celebrates Purim have this cross? It just blew their mind. So, I mean, they also asked me, they're like, so where are you from, sir? Where are you from? I'm like, oh, I'm from Indiana. And they're like, Indiana Jones. So I'm like, no, it's Indiana. It's just the state Indiana. Indiana. I'm like, no, I'm just from the state Indiana. That's where I live. It's where I was born, where I was raised. But anyway, they go on and on and on for a long time. Look through all these things, and finally, enough questions. Finally got down. I'm like, you got to realize I'm a stupid American. I got locked in the cave. That's all there is to it. After a little bit, they're like, okay, so do you have any contacts in Israel that we can call? And I'm like, well, there's only like 2 people who really live in the land. So I gave him the person that, he knew what he was doing. He was more or less a contact. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. Call him. They come back and they say, sir, you got to realize that he told us that he knows you, but not too well. He doesn't know you too. I'm like, yeah, I know we just met like once or twice. I mean, I know he's like, but he told us you're not a terrorist. So that's a good thing. You're not a terrorist. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's great. So I'm not a terrorist. That's awful. So at least they know it wasn't a terrorist. And that's what they say. He says, so I know, sir, you're not terrorist. And I'm like, okay, well, great. You know, they're not terrorists. So we go on hours and hours. I mean, basically, it started out, it got there like, 7:40, goes to 8, 9, 10, 11, goes to noon. Finally, I just have to wait. I mean, they set me down in people's offices. I didn't even know what they were doing. They take me to like one of the chief guys, one of the chief police officers, set me down in his office. They don't have any cameras. I mean, maybe hidden cameras and nothing, just leave me. They just go out and grab a cup of coffee for like 10 minutes. And I'm just sitting there waiting, doing nothing. I'm like, okay, this is weird. They take their time. They're not at all fast moving. And so, I mean, a few times sat me down next to this one guy. Apparently he was a terrorist. And I'm not a terrorist, because I'm just detained. I'm just trying to give the question, tell them the story, get the details right. The guy over here, though, apparently he was a Muslim that was not allowed in Jerusalem. So he was illegal. And, we're sitting on the bench together, and one of the Israeli soldiers comes over, and he's an American. And he's like, well, first off, he asked me what I'm doing there. And I tell him that, well, I was a stupid American. I got locked in this cave and spent the night. And it's like, really? And this guy, he's an American. He's moved to Israel. He's got great English, but also he knows a little bit of Hebrew. I mean, he's an Israeli soldier. I thought he reminded me a little bit of Samwise Gamgee off The Lord of the Rings, just to get a picture in your mind what this guy's like. Young guy like Samwise Gamgee. He's like, why are you here? And I'm like, that's a good question. I don't know why I was here. I missed my flight. And he's like, dude, you missed your flight. He's like, you shouldn't even be here. He's like, let me go tell my officer moron what's going on. And he said, oh, by the way, you got to think this is funny. This guy, his name in Hebrew is Moron. Basically, in English, it's moron, Moron. He said he's the guy in charge of your, doing your stuff. But, his name is Moron. He said, I like to call him Moron. He goes on and on about that. He thought it was really funny. And he said, because you know what? Officer Moron, he thinks it's my accent. He doesn't actually think, like, he doesn't get the joke. He doesn't know English. So, well, actually knew a little bit. It's beside the point. So he goes on and about Officer Moron and tries to get Officer Moron speeding things up because, this guy, he's like, he missed his flight and all that. So at least, this guy, Samwise Gamgee, officer, or the soldier guy, he helped me out, try to speed things up. And then afterward, he came back and he's like, okay, well, meanwhile, we could just talk. So, that at least killed some time. I could just talk with this Israeli, explain how, I'd like to move to Israel someday too, and about how I'm Jewish, he's Jewish, and all that kind of stuff. It was at least great company, because it was like 8 hours or more I was in this police station doing nothing. So, every once in a while he'd come along and he'd be like, oh, so what's going on? He's like, when's the last time I shot my gun? And he's telling me about guns and stuff like that. I'm like, he knows Americans at least. So, meanwhile, we finally sit down, and apparently, the lady's off for coffee break, and the officer gets to the right person and tries to type up my story about what happened. So finally sit down in the station. So she gets her typewriter out. She's typing Hebrew, of course, and I'm speaking English. And I tell her, I got to the cave. I was doing such and such. I was eating a snack, I was trying to be out there before a flight. I got locked in, basically just told her the whole thing. And I made sure to tell her the part that it was stupid American got locked in the cave. And so she says, stupid American get locked in the cave. I want to make sure they get that in their head, that I'm not really trying to get locked. It's just, I'm an American. Okay. So time goes on a little bit at a time. And then finally, she's like, okay, so we'll just get your fingerprints and get them on record, and she's like, and then, you're good to go. But she said, hold on. She said, wait, before you go, I need to tell you something. We decided that you're banned from the cave for 30 days as punishment. Do you know what you get? It's their punishment, 30 days. I'm like, yeah, that's great. So she said, okay, so you don't go to cave for 30 days. And I'm like, so after that, and she's like, yeah. After the 30 day, you go to cave, no problem. Just for 30 days. I'm like, okay, great. She said, and then on top of that, we say no. And she's like, try to get her English right. No go. You banned from Jerusalem, also 30 days. Okay, just banned from Jerusalem, also 30 days. And then just get out of here. You're done. Next person in line. And I'm like, okay, well, great. And I'm like, I don't even know how to get out of here, ma'am. She's like, okay, hold on. So she tells me where the door is, and I get on my way. It's actually 4:06 p.m. I keep all those down to the minute. I'll keep track of those numbers. 4:06 p.m. I'm out of there. And I'm like, well, that's a relief. Get out of the police station, whatever. But I ended up, having to get a new flight, go through all this hassle. The person at my hostel, he's like, Nathaniel, where have you been? My friend, he's, this Arab guy. My friend, Nathaniel, where have you been? What you doing? I'm like, I'm sorry, I got stuck in the cave all night. Can't really explain this. I'll tell you later. I ended up, I told him about it a couple years down the road. But anyways, make a long story short, that's basically the bottom line of it, Israel, what had happened.
Wow.
And
that's a crazy story. But that ban, that they, your punishment for getting locked in the cave, for 30 days, that didn't deter you from returning to Israel and continuing your adventures, after this happened. So how many times after this happened have you returned so far to Israel, Nathaniel?
So yeah, as far as it being, banned and me being banned, or that it was I took it more of a joke. Okay, 30 days literally, like I'm not gonna be back then anyway. So yeah, I mean, I was back 6 months later, so that was one time. What was that, 2016? Okay, yeah, and actually, I mean, my German friend, he thought it was, hilarious, the whole story and that, and so he's like, so why don't you take me to the cave? And I was thinking, Hezekiah's tunnel is what we talked about. He's like, the cave, and I'm like, well, I was banned from it. And he's like, Nathaniel, it's been longer than 30 days. It's September already. What are you talking about? Let's get going. So I'm like, okay, sure. So, he and his two little kids, I mean, I say little, they're teenagers or so, but, we'd go down in the cave and, go through the whole tour. And that's when I asked them, I said, so what time does the cave close? And they said, 4:30, sir, 4:30. I'm like, yeah, okay, 4:30. Well, if it closed at 4:30, I wouldn't have ever got stuck to begin with. But anyways, I did go back one time, 2015, go back, or 2016, go back in the cave. Again, 2017, and again, go back in the cave. 2016, I guess that's twice, and they'll be going back a third time. So yeah, I mean, more or less, it was just a joke. I mean, the one guy that's helped me out, he's kind of like one of his brothers is in line to be chief police and stuff. So he was like, "Are they giving you any problem at the border? Is everything okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, thumbs up, everything's good." So he's like, "Yeah, well, no problem. Just let me know if you need anything." So
And I know you went back last year as well, on a journey with your brother. You guys went there in 2017 as well, right?
yeah. I mean, my brother and I mean, that was just myself when I got stuck. But then the next fall, I went back with my younger brother, and he spent 3 weeks there. I mean, then we went to Germany for a little while. And then again, this year, we just were there for about 5 days. So,
So to kind of sum up, like all of this, you basically, you're going over there, you're going on adventures, you have some crazy experiences, and I understand that you have an upcoming trip to Israel, where in the past, you're looking for cool archaeological evidence of scripture, of Bible, of old places in the old city. You're looking around Hezekiah's cave for the entrance to find the Ark of the Covenant, and now upcoming, you have an opportunity to go out to an actual archaeological site. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And then we'll go ahead and get into your book you can tell us about.
Yeah. So, I mean, upcoming, I actually got a couple things on the agenda. The first off is, just a few weeks down the road, starting, I think it's, February 22nd to March 22nd or sometime in that general time frame. There's going to be a dig in Qumran, which I have the opportunity of joining. I'm not sure how long I'll be participating, but it all depends on who's going. Right now, I got 2 people that are signed up. We're going, no questions asked. The 2 of us, my younger brother and me, got 4 on the trip. I have it as an open invitation. If you want to contact me, I still have that open, but I have more opportunities. Like in May, I have the potential. There might be another dig I might participate on, and I just keep having doors open for that.
Awesome. So you guys can see, I wanted Nathaniel to share kind of, his experiences as he progressed in his journeys and his adventures in Israel. And now, this year, he's getting to be involved in actual archaeological digs, and we're getting him in contact with guys like Aaron Judkins, who's involved with the Mount Blanco Fossil Museum, and just some cool stuff happening and some big trips coming up for Nathaniel, and so more adventures are coming, and so we're looking forward to getting to partner with Nathaniel and his brother, and maybe tell some more of these adventures as they go and dig in the Qumran caves area or any other ancient biblical sites that might have hidden treasures for us to unearth. And so thanks for telling us that story, Nathaniel.
Yeah, okay, so to finish off that story, I got a little artifact I probably should show it to you too. So this is my little piece of evidence that I consider this my little piece of the plaster doorway to the Ark of the Covenant. Okay. And hopefully, nobody tries to say, that I broke this off, because literally it fell off. Okay. And so I picked it up off the ground. But anyway, there is a plaster doorway. I believe, it's very easily accessible. You get a pickaxe or something within a couple minutes, you're in. The Ark of the Covenant, I believe, Ron Wyatt found it. It's there definitely, but it's going to take, the right time, the right place, and the right go ahead. Another thing to finish off is that apparently those Israelis I kept trying to hound in, stupid American. The only thing they got was Indiana, because I said Indiana. So I get Indiana Jones. Well, turned out, a couple days later, my birthday present was that on my birthday, there's like 25 different newspapers that publish unidentified Indiana Jones looking for lost treasure. And they mistakenly say arrested or something, because, I was never arrested. So I was like, is this even me? But I'm pretty sure, they just had to embellish it a little bit. So, it shows you don't always trust the newspaper for the truth. But anyways, the newspaper did have this unidentified Indiana Jones. You got Jerusalem Post, the first thing. It says, Indiana Jones, he is not. First words of the article. And I had a question there, like, well, let's see, maybe he is. We'll see about that.
Wow. So, well, I mean, in a way, though, your heart is kind of like an Indiana Jones. You want to go on those adventures. You want to find those treasures, and you weren't trying to be disrespectful or destructive when you were in that cave. It was an accident, of course, but how funny it is that they kind of characterized you and your passions for Israel and the awesomeness of the things that you can find there, and the land, and the locations of where the Messiah walked, where the apostles walked, where the ancient Israelites walked. And it really, these articles they published all over the news from Israel, really kind of characterized you, even though they kind of did it just because they misheard you because you were from Indiana. They really kind of characterized your journey as an individual and how you wanted to be somebody like Ron Wyatt, who has discovered very interesting locations biblically, and whether or not the Ark of the Covenant is in that location, there might be some cool stuff down in that cave that they sealed off, and maybe one day you'll be a part of a team that can get through that plaster wall and see what they got hidden down in that tunnel.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, a lot of stuff, it did, it was a fantastic story that they published. It just wasn't all the way true. I mean, this little piece of pottery that I ended up getting, it just didn't dump out of my backpack when they went through it. But there are about three other, there are two of the stone little piece of pottery this size, two of the clay, so a total of four. I mean, they said they'd give it to my friend in the antiquities department and get it all squared away. Well, that turned into in the newspaper that I had like a backpack stuffed with treasure or whatever. So they always have to add to the story, but I mean, it is what it is. And
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, Nathaniel. And I'd really like to get into your book because not only does Nathaniel have a passion for the mysteries in Israel and the things that are just waiting to be unearthed, but he spent a lot of time and effort into this book he was telling us about, and really I'd like to dive into it. So let's go ahead and jump over to those slides and let's walk through what you're talking about there in the book.
So yeah, to go ahead with my little presentation here, I ended up having 8 questions that I wanted to go through that were my own. I mean, we might be able to do questions and answers afterward. We'll see how the time is. But as far as my own question, I wanted to go through 8 different things that I thought was important. And that's starting off with just number 1, I got how long was Yeshua's ministry? Got to get that down. Some people say 3.5 years. Some say, way over, like, 10, 20 more, or is it just a year or 2? When did each event occur? And, how do we even know, when one thing happened, when another thing happened? Is that something that can be calculated? Because, you take one chronological New Testament, another one, you got, the New King James and the, New International, or all the different ones, they don't match up at all. And that's what I realized. I'm like, looking at these chronological Bibles, I get one another. They might even both be the same version, but whoever does the chronology, they get stories either on one side or the other, and they don't even make any sense. So I want to go through what I did and was it logical? I mean, a lot of that is going to have to get summarized, but just what did I do? And did I have a reason? Was there a method that I used to get to where I got for the chronology? And then the third thing, how do I consolidate seemingly erroneous passages, like contradictions? For instance, you got John 6:4 that leads some people to think that the ministry was 3 years because they say it was another Passover, but the other gospels don't really say there was another Passover. So what are you going to do? Are you going to add a Passover and then have a big gap or not? Or, kind of stretch things out? What do you do about that? We're going to go through that. The fourth thing, how do I translate the text? Is it an original translation, a literal? What exactly is the translation? Because I get, I collect New Testaments. I don't know. Now I might have 35 or 38 New Testaments. Not as much as some people. I know I have a friend that's got like 200 New Testaments, 200 plus, really wants to get all those English New Testaments out. There are also Greek ones. But I notice when you get to English translations, we have so many translations out there. A lot of times you get a translation and they're just basically getting a New King James translation and then they just add words here and there. And they're not actually making their own translation. They're just embellishing one. So I want to go over what exactly my translation is and how I made that. And then the fifth question, am I qualified to make a Greek-English translation? Would I call it professional? Do we even know Greek? How is all that going about? I did go over a little bit about that, just that I've studied it for a while, but I want to go into a little more detail, just a little bit about how well I know the Greek. Just because anybody that says, anybody could say they could do a translation, but literally, and I mean literally, I've seen one translation. The other day, I was looking through my Facebook feeds actually, and I saw this person got a picture of their new Messianic translation. And I was looking at it, and it said Yahshua, okay? And I'm like, well, Yeshua, it's not a big deal. I'm pretty sure, the Hebrew has the E's, but anyway, I'm like, it's not a big deal. And I look at the word, it says, and the Yadaim said to him, I'm like, Yadaim, what? And it spells it out like Yadaim, like Yadaim. And I just look at that for a while. Yadaim, I'm like, pretty sure that's supposed to say Jews. In Greek, it would say Judaim, or Judaios. It would be like the Yahudim in Hebrew, Yahudim. Well, I can't say, I'm not trying to, not trying to speak bad about anybody. I have no idea whose translation this was, but it was a literal text. It was printed on a printing press. I don't know when it was. It was a Messianic translation. It called the Jews Yadaim. And I was just flabbergasted because I looked at my hands and I said, Yadaim. Yadaim. This is the Hebrew word Yadaim. It's hands. Okay. For those of you that don't know, you just learned a new Hebrew word. The one hand is Yad. You got Yad Shemola. You got Yad Yemini. You got your right hand, your left hand. You got your two Yadaim. That is your hands. And I don't know who did this, but somebody made a translation and they said that the Jews were hands. I have no idea why. I just know it's out there. So it makes you wonder, you got to be careful who you're listening to and what kind of Bible you're reading, because at least for me, I don't want to read a translation and have these talking hands. Balaam's donkey was talking, but the Bible does not talk about a hand talking. So anyways, you got to be careful. And I want to go through about a little bit about how well I know Greek. Can I do a translation? I want to go through Shem Tov, Hebrew, Matthew for the 6th point. Was it written in Hebrew? What do we have? A little bit about that. And then the last thing, the second last thing, just when will this be readily accessible for my latest edition? And I already told you sometime probably to September. Don't have too much to say about that. And then lastly, just what do I believe about Ron Wyatt's discoveries, Sodom and Gomorrah, the Red Sea crossing, real Mount Sinai, Ark of the Covenant, and was the witness of Ron Wyatt accurate? What do we have to show for it? That I really think, I've talked a little bit about it, about me trying to get to the Ark of the Covenant, but I'm going to show a few more pictures and slides. Just, I got some sulfur from Gomorrah, one of the relatives of Ron Wyatt gave to me a couple years ago. And I also have a piece of ash from Sodom. And I want to show that on the screen in a little bit when we get to there. So that's the outline. And I'll just go straight to dig right into the beginning as how long was Yeshua's ministry? And you got a lot of people, they want to say Yeshua's ministry was 3.5 years. 3.5 years. And when I was going to make my thing, I saw, most people say 3.5 years. And then I knew Michael Rood said it was like 70 weeks or a year and some months. And I'm like, okay, well, I am not going to put a time frame and then try to put all the dates into it. I thought instead, what I want to do is take the literal word of God of the New Testament and just pinpoint the dates here and there and just see what happens. And that's what I did. I just pinpointed the dates on the calendar on the restored biblical Hebrew calendar. Michael Rood claims he's the only one that can go back. He even used NASA. I don't want to prove of NASA, but he goes back to try to, say when the new moons are sighted. You don't have to be Michael Rood to do that. You could just go back and see when the moon was what and what date it was, and just approximate when the calendar was. That's all he does anyway. So I went and did the same thing, and I came up with my chronology. And I could go into a little detail, just that, what I did was take everything literally. When it says that Jesus, I have in my book, Jesus, later, I'm using the Hebrew word Yeshua, but in my text, Jesus goes into the house, that he goes into the house in one gospel. He comes out of the house in another gospel. Okay. It's the same story, the same time. And he goes in one gospel, out in the other. It's the same thing. And then you got a few stories, like, for instance, the calling of Matthew. I like to talk about this because a lot of people, and over the last few years, I've heard several people tell this story. They're like, so Jesus, he just sees Matthew, this random tax collector, sitting at their seat of customs, and he just walks up and says, hey, Matthew, you follow me. And what do you know? He follows him. And I thought about that. I'm like, if some weirdo comes up to me and says, follow me, am I really going to follow him? It just doesn't really sound right. So what I did, putting these dates together and, comparing Matthew with Mark with Luke, I realized even though the order does show that Matthew, just has Yeshua walk up and say, follow me, if you reorganize according to when it says about the same day, as he's talking this day, the next day, you reorganize it to the literal time frame of each thing, each story, literally, it actually has the chronology to go like as follows. That first, Yeshua knows the disciples for, several months. You don't really know. First, he goes up on a mountain and he ordains the 12, and he calls them apostles. He comes down from the mountain. So, Matthew's one of those 12. He comes down from the mountain and he preaches another version of the Beatitudes. They're called Luke's Beatitudes because it's Luke saying the Beatitudes, but it's not the same time frame as Matthew. It's a little bit later. Luke's Beatitudes. And then after Luke's Beatitudes, he walks into a house. And what he does in this house, he's preaching, teaching the word, healing people. And you notice that Mark and Luke, they both tell this story, this miraculous happening, that there's this guy that comes down the roof and just suddenly, he appears, and there's this lame guy. He was born by these 4 guys. He drops down through the roof. They break open the roof. They lay him in the house, and they're like, we brought him here. You're going to heal him. And so then he says, yeah, pick up your mat, walk, and he's healed. Well, you look at the Gospel of Matthew. Matthew doesn't even tell that story. How do you think about it? You think, why doesn't Matthew tell that story about this guy coming through the roof? You think if Matthew was there, he would have known. Well, you keep going as follows. And the gospel says after that happens, immediately the same day, he walks outside the house after he heals these people. He teaches by the Sea of Galilee. And that's when he sees Matthew sitting at the receipt of customs. And he says, Matthew, follow me. Hopefully it makes a little more sense. He's already ordained a disciple. He already knows Yeshua, but he still is tax collecting. He's still a tax collector that's also a disciple. What Yeshua meant by that was, hey, you just missed something amazing. You can't be tax collecting at the same time. You're going to miss it. So he tells Matthew, follow me. Matthew gets up, follows him. Then that night, Matthew has a retirement party. I call it a retirement party. He's given this great feast to all his tax collecting friends, and the Bible says sinners, okay, these tax collecting friends. And as he's sitting down having his feast, you got this guy, goes by the name of Jairus. He comes in the middle of Yeshua talking. And I want to get into this too, that it shows the day by day, moment by moment things you find from putting the Gospels together, that Yeshua is at Matthew's party, and it gives the thing of what Yeshua, it gives the lyrics or the text, what he says. And he says about, nobody, when he drinks new wine, straightway desireth the old, for he saith the new is better. And while he's speaking this, Jairus comes in and says, my daughter lieth at the point of death. Please, lay your hands, heal him or heal her. And Matthew's the only one that actually gives that information, that it was while he was talking that this guy comes in and ruins his party. So, that's what Matthew's paying attention to while he's writing the gospel. The other people, they put those stories in there a little bit out of order. But Matthew's very literal, saying, I'm having this party. This is my party. Yeshua is talking. He's got the attention. And all of a sudden, this guy walks up, says his daughter's dying, and we all leave and go raise her from the dead. And then there's this other lady that tags along, and then these 2 blind men. And then finally, he makes it back to the house. So, and supposedly he finishes dinner. That is the full story. So from putting the Gospels together, moment by moment, piece by piece, day by day, that was my goal. And that's what I believe I've achieved. I mean, to the best that I can, that every detail from the different Gospels that have their own perspective, when you put that together, you get a much fuller perspective of Yeshua's ministry. So back to the time frame that I first started with using the literal day by day. You know, if it says first he goes into the house, then he goes out of the house, then he goes by the sea, then he does this, that is the order. Next, I went by the feast. If there's one feast or the other feast, I took the feasts as pinpoints on the calendar. And then I just, put everything in. If it's a Sabbath day, sometimes, it could be one Sabbath day or the other, but, there's only 2 or 3 Sabbaths it could have been. And from there, I found that it looked like it was about a year long. And that's what brings me to Luke 4:19, when Yeshua goes into the synagogue on, I think it was Nisan 8 or Nisan 9. I kind of switched up that on my chronology, but he comes in and he says that he says the Spirit of Yehovah Elohim is upon me and he goes on, it says, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. In Hebrew, the acceptable year, and that word in Hebrew, year, is a literal year. It's not some kind of a figurative year or something like that, like some people try to make it out to be. And I mean, to prove it as much as you could prove it, I have one of the early church fathers, and church father is just a title. I don't really believe in the church the way it is, but it is what it is. There is a guy by the name of Clement of Alexander, 1800 years ago, about 182 to 202 of the Common Era. He wrote a book called Stramata. I got the book, chapter, verse. He says as follows, that and the Lord was born in the 28th year, when the first census was ordered to be taken in the reign of Augustus. And to prove that this is true, it is written in the gospel by Luke as follows: and in the 15th year, in the reign of Tiberius Caesar, the word of the Lord came unto Yochanan the son of Zechariah. And again in the same book, and Yeshua was coming to his baptism, being about 30 years of age, and so on. And that it was necessary for him to preach only a year. This also is written, he hath sent me to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord. So Clement of Alexander, he taught, just shortly after Yeshua was crucified, he taught that Yeshua proclaimed a literal year of the Lord, and that he says so in his book, the year of the Lord. And he says, and this was a year singular. And again, another early church father says as follows, and this is Eusebius. He says in his book, Ecclesiastical History, and this indeed is true, for it is evident that the 3 evangelists, speaking of Matthew, Mark, Luke, recorded only the deeds done by the Savior for 1 year after the imprisonment of Yochanan the Baptist, and indicated this at the beginning of their account. Another third witness, you got Origen, and I don't say he's a great guy. He had his issues, but he does say this. He says, in his book, De Principiis, book 4, chapter 5, what are we to say, moreover, concerning those prophecies of Christ contained in the Psalms, especially the one with a superscription, a song for the beloved, in which it is stated that his tongue is a pen of a ready writer, fairer than the children of men, that grace is poured out into his lips. Now, the indication that grace has been poured out into his lips is this, that after a short period had elapsed, for he taught only during a year and some months, the whole world nevertheless became filled with his doctrine and with the faith in his religion. So again, this guy named Origen, he had a few doctrinal issues down the road. I think it was either him or one of his buddies that, made up the whole 3.5 year thing. But that's another story later on. At this time, he agreed with everybody else. It was 3.5 years. It was a year and some months. 3.5 years came later. So that's at least 3 witnesses. There may be more. Those are all that I got for now, that say his ministry was about a year and a few months. So what I did, I just pinned the tail on the donkey, so to speak, just going through putting all these dates on. I could tell that there had to be an Adar Vet, which in the Hebrew calendar, you got that 13th month added every now and then. I could tell there had to be one of those because there's two things I knew for a fact. I knew that Yeshua must have died on a Wednesday. At least that's what I believe. He died on a Wednesday, rose on Saturday night, and so to make it 3 days, 3 nights. And then another thing, and that the Wednesday there was a certain day of the week, and that in Tishri, the 7th month, it talks about the woman that is caught in adultery, and it says the next day, and that next day was the Sabbath day. So you got Tishri 22nd being a Sabbath day. You got a day of the week and a date, and then you got another day of the week and a date. So you got two things to work with that you got to have a day and a date. And then in between, that's when you got to look up the sightings of the new moons and figure out, okay, so the sighting of the new moon, maybe some days it could have been this, could have been that. It could have been 29 days, could have been 30 days. It got all this mathematical calculations. And that's where, the math comes involved with all this calculating. Well, I could tell the only way to get those 2 days and dates to match, you got to have the 13th month. Otherwise, the whole word of God would have been in error. So I couldn't do that. There had to be the 13th month for that to be accurate. And with that put in place, that's when I counted all the days from the baptism of Yeshua to the baptism of the Ruach HaKodesh. And I have the dates as far as what I believe, and I couldn't say this is 100% for a fact, but in my book, the approximate dates are going to be Shavat 19, which is about 4,000 from creation, to Sunday, January 27th, and I have that 778 AUC, which is Latin from the beginning of the founding of Rome. I have that because back then they didn't know, Common Era, AD, BC, whatever. They didn't do that. They had 778. And that would coincide with 25 of the Common Era on the Julian calendar. And again, January 25 on the Julian calendar goes to January 25, February 25, March 26. Okay, that in that day and age, the Julians, when they calculated it, March was the beginning of the year. And it was actually March the 15th, if I understand it right, when the date shifted. So that's how it is in this book, that it's not the January 1st New Year. It's the original Julian calendar. And that's to line it up so you kind of get a feel for where it is in our calendar. And then I have it on the biblical calendar. So it starts there, ends Sivan 8 of 4002, which was about Sunday, June 1st of 27 of the Common Era. And that totals a grand total of 490 days, 77s, okay, 70 weeks. And I added that up, counted the weeks, added them all up, total 70 weeks. Afterward, I just sat back, took a deep breath, and I was grateful because I knew I had succeeded. I had not started with a 70-week and pinned it in there. I started without any time frame. It turned out to be 70 weeks. And I wanted to do that just so I don't put God in a box. I don't want to put God in a box. But I was relieved because I felt confident. If it was turning out to be 77, that seems right, because there's a prophecy in the book of Daniel 9:23 to 27. And it says, at the beginning of thy supplications, the commandment came forth, and I've come for to show thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore, understand the matter, consider the vision. And again, this is something some people have different doctrinal beliefs, say, we can never understand this matter, we can never consider the vision. Well, one thing Yeshua says, he says, whoever reads Daniel, and this is a third person imperative in the Greek, third person singular imperative. Yeshua says, understand. Whoever reads Daniel, understand. So you go back to Daniel, and what does the angel say? It says, therefore, understand the matter, consider the vision. This is something that Yahovah Almighty wants us to understand. And that's why I believe it's important to at least try to understand it. And one of the prophecies says 70 weeks, which is the Hebrew word for seven, Shevuim, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon the holy city to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins and to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal the vision of the prophecy and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem and to Messiah the prince shall be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. The street shall be built again in the wall, even in troublous times. And after 62 sevens shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the world desolation are determined. And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. For whenever spreading of abominations he shall make it desolate at the end. The consummation of that term should be poured upon the desolate. And I am reading it fast just because I'll get into details a little bit. Just basically, the prophecy says 7 sevens, 62 sevens, 1 7. That is exactly how Yeshua's ministry was. Okay, that this is a layer. I don't believe this is the sole fulfillment, but one of the layers of that fulfillment is that from his baptism in the Jordan, you go 62 sevens. That's his ministry. He dies after 62 sevens, cut off but not for himself. And then that was on the 63rd seven. So you got the 63 sevens. And then you got the last, when it was in the midst of the week. And then you got the last 7 sevens of the counting of the Omer. So the whole ministry, it really it keeps that pattern. And again, I didn't start with the pattern and fill it in. I started with filling it in and came to that pattern. So I believe that is one of the fulfillments of that prophecy. And so the next thing is just when and where did each event occur? I think I've already kind of gone over some of these. So, I mean, I have here a picture of the tomb, and in the book, I do include quite a few pictures, and I'm putting even more in right now. Just, I mean, Yeshua was put in a tomb. There's the tomb. Another picture. These are the cutouts with me standing there. I don't have me in the book, but just the picture of the cutouts. Got, that was the place where Yeshua was crucified, and that's in the book. And, there's a nail from where Yeshua was crucified, so this is not just some random little hill that, just somebody just decided, hey, Constantine's mommy says, hey, that's where Jesus died on the cross, and we're going to set up a church right there and go down. No, this is actually a place that they found artifacts pertaining to the crucifixion. And even like the Red Sea crossing. I mean, of course, this wasn't in the New Testament, but it is something in the Bible that I go into a little bit of that in my book as well. Just when does stuff happen? Where? What do we have today? What proof and evidence do we have? All of that is covered and even being added and covered in my next edition. The third thing, how do I consolidate these seemingly erroneous passages like contradictions, John 6:4, etc. So, okay, so this is, okay, let me get to this. So this is a big one that, again, do not mean to speak bad things about Michael Rood. I really do respect and honor Michael Rood. He started me on this trail, and he's a great guy in a lot of ways. Most things are right, but he's got a few things that I really don't agree with. And it's respectful, okay? I don't have any grudges, just there's a few differences I have. One thing is Michael Rood says that this John 6:4, that, the Catholics, they just added it in the text. It never was there to begin with. I'm like, okay, seriously. The Catholics just added this verse in the text. Well, let's see what it is. So, I go back to Codex Sinaiticus, Codex Alexandrinus, and Vaticanus, and all these old texts, even some of the papyri and from in Dublin and the Chester Beatty papyri, whatever we can get our hands on. I try to look these up, see what does the text say. The oldest, I'm not talking, 400 and 500 AD. I'm talking even like 350 AD. Sometime the earliest text we got of this, and 100% the oldest texts have this verse that says, and then Gusta Pascha heorte ton Judaeon. Literally, I mean, the King James says, and the Passover feast of Jews was nigh. Well, when I read that, I was like, okay, well, I've known Greek long enough that I started thinking about this. In English, nigh, nigh means near. Well, what does it mean in Greek? This word in goose, does it have to be near? The Greek word, it's a distance being close. Close as in, near rather than far. So I started thinking, what about most recent? If say it just happened, could it be close as in it just happened instead of close as in it's just about to happen? I mean, in English, that doesn't make sense, but in Greek, what about if it makes sense in Greek? And even in Hebrew, even if it doesn't make sense in Greek, what about Hebrew? Because that's what they spoke. So that's where I decided, well, I'm not going to ask a Greek person, because in Greek, they got their Greek mentality. I want to ask somebody that knows Hebrew. So I decided to go down to Louisville, Kentucky, and my Hebrew professor, Russell T. Fuller, Dr. Russell T. Fuller, he's a professor at the seminary there, the Baptist Theological Seminary. I went down there, spent a couple days, and I don't know if it was an hour or 2 hours that I got to actually just sit and talk to him. I mean, I went to a few of his classes. I mean, second and third year classes, what he had me sitting on, and a few second and third year Greek classes. And it was kind of funny too, just to say, like, I was 16, spent all these years studying Greek. I go to a second and third year college Greek class, and I'm like, these are like, 20-year-olds that don't know their stuff. They really don't know Greek. It shows how well those theological seminaries actually teach people. But that's beside the point. I got a good time to actually sit down, talk to this professor, PhD, college professor. And I asked him, I said, so, what do you think about this? Because I showed him my book, showed him the research I'd done. And at first he's kind of like, well, he wasn't sure about the, 3.5 year versus the 1 year, the 2 year. He wasn't sure about that, but he gets some of his theological books out. He gets to one place that actually gives a different theory than he has the 1 year theory, 2 year theory, 3 year. He says, okay, read this. I got to go do something. I'll be back in a second. So I read through the few theories, a few paragraphs. He comes back and he says, okay, so, yeah, so you got any more questions? And I say, yeah, I do have a few more questions. What about this verse? It says, and Gusta Pasca te John Yudan said, what do you think that'd be in Hebrew? And of course, he's a Hebrew college professor. He's not only Hebrew, he's also studied, Aramaic, Greek, Latin. I don't know all the languages he studied, but probably like 6 or 8 or, half a dozen or more languages. And he studied Greek just as well as Hebrew and all the other. He tells me, he says, well, to tell the truth, in Greek, that word angus doesn't relate to future or past. It's only close, as in the time frame is close. It could be past or future. And he says, come to think of it, in Hebrew, the Hebrew word that would be used there, it doesn't mean either way either. It just means close. And it says, so what about like something like most recent? Would that do? And he said, yeah, it's good enough for me. It'd be good enough for you. He said, I mean, if that's what you think it means, that it was passive first and then that, he said, translate it that way. He says, that's a literal translation that'll work for your text. And that's what I decided to do. I said, okay, well, if that works, that's what I'm going to do. Because to me, it makes way more sense to say that it was purposefully there, that it was an original part, and later down the road, people just might have misunderstood what that was referring to. So I believe, that the Passover is referring to the general spring festival, and it's used several times in the New Testament, this word Pascha, just to be the spring festival. That spring festival of Passover and then Shavuot, that had just happened. That basically we're talking about June, and that is the literal translation of this verse. So that's as much as I need to say about that. There's a few other passages. I don't have those right here to show you, but I have them all in my book, just different things that seemingly might be contradictions. I just go through and show that they're not contradictions. Everything just goes together. It all fits together anyways. So the fourth thing I wanted to go through is how exactly, like specifically, how do I translate the text? Is this an original? Is it literal translation? What kind of translation is it? So again, in my book, some people might try to, be upset with me for this, that I decided for my translation, I'm going to use thee and thou and ye and you. Some people might be like, oh, well, that's old English. Nobody understands that anymore. It's outdated, all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, really? If I say thou canst eat, you don't know that means you can eat. It's the same thing. So, I mean, the stuff that's unintelligible is stuff like, there's a passage in John Wycliffe's translation, 1380 something or other. We don't know the date, but 1380 something. He has a translation, and he says, and the holiday of the Thurflows that is said Pasch nigh. If you understood that, kudos to you. You probably, either really know old Middle and modern English, or, you're just good at that. But anyways, in 1380 something or other, he says the holiday of the Thurflows, it said Pasknight, which basically is what I just read to you, that the feast of Passover was most recent. So that's what I call unintelligible. In my translation, I make sure that it's intelligible to the person. But the reason I use these and thous is because in the Greek text, as well as in Hebrew and other languages, you have a you singular and a you plural. You have a subject case and an accusative case of your pronouns. Just like you got to say, I love you. You can't say me love you. Or, you say, you love me. You don't say you love I. You have a difference. I and me are different. Well, in English, you and you are the same. So the reason I have in my translation, the compared to you, is for certain things, like when Yeshua tells Nicodemus, he says, verily, verily, I say unto thee, ye must be born again. What he's saying is, I say unto thee, singular, Nicodemus, ye plural must be born again. If I just read that in the NIV, it'd say, verily or truly, truly, I say to you, you must be born again. And you'd be like, I say to you basically thinking he's directly speaking to Nicodemus. Well, I want to know the actual reference. Another thing off the top of my head is when Yeshua's at the Last Supper, he's got Shimon Kepha right next to him, and he tells Shimon, he says, Shimon, Shimon, Satan has desired to have thee, to sift thee as wheat. He's speaking just only to Shimon. But then he goes on to say, but I have prayed for you. Oh, hold on. Sorry, I said that wrong. I don't have the text in front of me. That's why. Okay. Shimon, Satan hath desired to have you, to sift you as wheat. So he's wanting Satan wants all of the disciples, but I prayed for thee, you singular, that thy faith fail not, and when thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren. So then he switches to singular. And I just think it's very important to get to the closest to the original, what the meaning is, because if you don't know if it's you singular or you plural, there's cases like this where you're not going to get the meaning. You're going to see, he says, I prayed for you that your faith doesn't fail when you're converted. It's like, okay, so is he speaking to just Simon? What about all of the disciples? Did he pray for everybody? Who was he praying for? So that's basically why I chose the these and thous. I used a lot of the vocabulary that John Wycliffe and William Tyndale used in their original translation. And then what I did was just made sure that every single Greek word of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John was translated in order chronologically from start to finish. And that every Greek word got an English equivalent, and it's literal. It's not a copy and paste from the King James, but say like if the King James uses certain words, I'm going to use the same vocabulary word because, there's too many translations that just try to use synonyms. Well, you want to use it closest to the Greek. So that's as far as that. As far as the fifth thing I have, just to make qualified to translate that, I would hope that from, watching me, just seeing how well acquainted I am with Hebrew and with Greek, that you could kind of see that I'm not just Joe Schmo trying to make a translation, that I can read and write fluently. Comprehend Greek. I can listen to the audio New Testament with the Koine Greek pronunciation, the modern Greek pronunciation. Give me any Greek word and I could parse it for you. Give you, what it is in the analytical lexicon. That's about as well as William Tyndale did. If you want to talk about my age, William Tyndale had a master's degree when he was only 16. So I don't really believe age matters. It only does in certain cases, I would say. Sixth thing I want to talk about, just what about the Gospels? Were they written in Greek or were they written in Hebrew? So, that's kind of a big topic because there does seem to be a lot of Hebrew in the New Testament. There is something called Shem Tov's Hebrew Matthew, which I've read. I've read it in the original Hebrew. I've read it a few times. There's loads and loads of passages that just, blow your mind. You read this and it just makes a whole lot of sense. Like when he says that scribes sit and Moses seat whatever he says instead of whatever they say. it does make more sense to say he, but can you use that in a scholarly translation? As of today, I don't believe we have enough text yet. I would hope that in the future, more text might show up so we can have a better basis to actually make a translation off the Hebrew, because right now we've got like thousands and thousands of texts of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John going back a couple thousand years, but Matthew, we really don't. I mean, we do know, that it was written in Hebrew. I have the Latin here. Denique Mateus qui Evangelium Hebraio sermoni conscripsit ita prosud Hosanna Barama, it is Hosanna in excelsis. And those of you that don't know Latin, which is most of you, it basically says that Matthew, the evangelist, in the Hebrew sermon, that he wrote this Hebrew sermon, the Hebrew script, and he put it this way, that he put it on Hosanna Barama, which is to say, Hosanna in the highest. And that word Hosanna in Barama is actually, it's not in Shem Tob's Hebrew Matthew. And so what I see is that St. Jerome, he was talking about something else. It wasn't the same as Shem Tob's. It was Shem Tob, maybe a copy off a copy. We don't know. But as of today, we don't have an accurate Hebrew Matthew that I could rely 100% on. But I do think it's worth the value, the historical value of and research of that topic. Okay, and the seventh thing is just, when will there be a copy readily accessible? I want to go over sort of briefly on this. I've gone through a few of the editions. I have quite a few of the first editions, got over 150 left. It was a small printing. I don't have thousands. It was self-published, but I have my first edition left. So if any of you would like to buy it, they are, they're as good as you can get. My first edition, I've definitely done a lot of updating, but that's all that's available now. The next thing that will be available will be this September. I plan to be releasing my last edition, but hopefully I'll be back and, be able to promote that when it comes. So, lastly, I want to get back into Ron Wyatt, unless there's anything else you want to.
Yeah, well, I think that was great. I feel it's very interesting, this concept of a 1 year ministry versus 3.5 year. And just really quickly, I wanted to, ask you, a lot of people think it's heresy to not teach a 3.5 year ministry. Because it's a very Catholic doctrine. It's very ingrained in the Christian church. 3.5 years, we all have heard it. So for people who would come from that position, if you're not teaching a 3.5 year ministry, you're teaching heresy, what would your response be?
Okay, so I would have to ask this. Do you want to believe the Catholic Church, or do you want to believe the actual literal word of God? Because the Catholic Church, and it was decided about, I don't know the exact date, if it was 300, 360, something like that. They decided that they could read Daniel. They knew that Daniel's prophecy was being fulfilled, but instead of fulfilling Daniel's prophecy like that, it was fulfilled, having the 70 literal sevens of days, they decided, I have an idea. What about if we get 483 years from the going forth the commandment to restore to build Jerusalem to Yeshua? That goes up to about like 25 of the Common Era. And then they said, well, let's add 3.5 years to the ministry, because there's that last 7. There's 2 3.5 year periods. Let's get 3.5 years to the Messiah. Let's give 3.5 years to the apostles, which, anybody can see that, Paul was going on for a lot longer than 3.5 years, but they're like, just give 3.5 years to the apostles. Then we got a 7-year period. That's the final week of Daniel. Basically, from then, that's when they started counting that the Pope, which they said Peter was the Pope that went on to all of the other popes, that the Pope is now, Almighty God on earth, the victor of Rome. And he's now God, that this Pope is God, and that he was Almighty God reigning in the apocalypse and that millennium is basically the theology. So it goes back to a Catholic doctrine that you got 3.5 years and then 3.5 years to fulfill that week of Daniel, which I do not believe that's been fulfilled yet.
Awesome. Yeah, we would agree too, that no, the Pope's not the vicar of Christ on earth, and the millennium reign is still something that is coming, where Yeshua will reign physically and literally here on earth, and we're patiently awaiting his return. And so that's one thing that 3.5-year doctrine does support, which is interesting and gets you thinking. No, of course, we're not bashing anybody who's still holding on to that belief set or mindset, and I don't believe you're bashing that, people who believe in a 3.5-year ministry. But whenever you look at the text, it's very easily justifiable to believe in a 1-year ministry with a few extra months that would fulfill those 70 weeks of Daniel. And what a fascinating thing to just take it literally, where Yeshua, his ministry starts when he's like, I'm declaring this is the acceptable year of the Lord. And then you see, as time passes over, it's really interesting, and I really appreciate how you approach that topic. And so I just wanted to ask you, how do you approach people who believe it's a heresy not to teach the 3.5-year?
What I do, because it's a heresy, most of the things I believe in, really compared to a lot of Christians, because even myself, I don't even like to use the term Christian. I understand the original term Christian in the New Testament was a term meaning the people that were following Yeshua, the people that were following the Greek uses the word Christos, which is Christ, which is Mashiach, the people that followed Mashiach. But nowadays, you got the Catholic religion, you got all these things. And I would say that I'm not going to say, you can't be my friend, or I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not going to have you over for dinner. I like to be friends with anybody. There's people that actually, they believe that Muhammad was the prophet, and I'll still talk to them, have a good conversation, because I like to talk to people. It does not get between me, their religion, whether they're atheist or Muslim, Jewish or Christian, that I do not have a problem with differences in belief, but I do understand, some people do.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to accept that,
and it is kind of frustrating that the term Christianity today is used to describe people who in no way exemplify and represent the Messiah. It's a term that is very loosely applied to nominal Christianity, Christianity that's just country club Christianity. And it's frustrating because they are, in a way, people who say we are the people of God, we are the people who are following the Messiah, and they live oppositely. They're walking a life that's taking the name of the Lord in vain. And so I understand kind of your discrepancy against that term, Christianity. Of course, we're not bashing anybody who calls themselves Christians. I call myself a Christian sometimes, and it's just, I understand where you're coming from, in the fact that term no longer really signifies the faith of the 1st and 2nd century believers. Instead, it signifies the Catholic Church, and it signifies all types of denominations that are very off on some things. They're good on some things, but they're very off on some things. It signifies cults who call themselves Christians. So it's very, you got to be careful with terminology, and of course with any terminology there's a broad stroke that can just kind of include a lot of people who you don't want to be associated with. Even the term like Hebrew roots is a dangerous term, because there's people in the Hebrew roots movement who are very far off on some topics. And so any terminology, even including the term Christian or Christianity, you got to be very careful with what are you defining with that term.
Yeah, and again, I started off a little bit with my history, that my parents had been involved in certain churches, not really anymore, because we came out of it, and we're not affiliated with any church. Neither am I or my parents at all. But what I haven't mentioned yet either is also that my father, he was actually adopted at birth, and so when he was born, his birth name was Cohen. Cohen, Cohen, and later, I also know that side of the family too, both biological and adopted side of the family. So even though he was born into a Christian family, he also has those roots in Judaism. And of course, most of my family on that side, they still do not accept Yeshua. They don't believe he's Messiah. I still love them. They're still my family, but there's a few disagreements I have with them. But at the same time, Christianity is also a problem. That's why for me, I'd like to consider myself Jewish, that is the religion that I keep, keeping the Sabbath, keeping the commandments of Jehovah. But at the same time, Yehoshua is the Messiah. I mean, he came, he died on the cross. He was the Messiah. He was the blood sacrifice. And it was his dying on the cross that gives us eternal life. That there's nothing about that that's not a Catholic doctrine that, they just added later. Yeshua really was the Messiah. He was the Son of God. I mean, now I do have some problems with some people that try to say Jesus and God are the same person, because Yeshua, he was the Son of God. He was, and he was. It's this, paradox, and that's why I don't want to get into that, because you can confuse people. It's something that's, people have their theories. Jesus is God. Jesus isn't God. He was the Son of God, but at the same time, God is one. And that's as much as that I need to get into, that God is one. Yeshua came to reveal the Father, but at the same time, he is in the same. He and the Father are one, and that's what he says. So,
we'll go ahead and get into your thoughts on Ron Wyatt. Now I know Ron Wyatt is controversial. He has some very interesting and exciting discoveries that he made. He also has some that many people disagree with, of course. And I know you are very fond of Ron Wyatt, so I'd love to hear your opinion on Ron Wyatt and his work. And of course, that's some of what inspired you with your adventures in Israel, inspired you to seek out, the ancient, places in Israel. And so, yeah, let's get into Ron Wyatt.
Okay, yeah. So I don't want to get into naming names or anything, but one of Ron's relatives was the person that got me into the whole cave thing, but it wasn't their fault. It was my own stupidity. I take the blame, But anyway, continuing down the road of Ron Wyatt. So as you can see, this next slide I got, this is Ron Wyatt's basement. He's no longer living. His family is taking over the house, taking over the relics and all the artifacts and all that. And this is a picture of myself in the basement. And what I'm holding there, those are human remains from the crossing of the Red Sea. So I know there's some people out there that try to say Ron Wyatt is just, some con artist. He never dug anywhere. He never did anything, and he never found anything, and trying to say, he's never got a permit, never did this, never that. Well, go to his basement if you want to, not everybody's invited to the basement, of course, but in the basement at his house, he's got everything there. That's why I'm putting some pictures up, because it's going to be a lot easier to just show you pictures on the screen than to take, thousands of people in the basement to show the artifacts. So, it got another picture. Those are the two bones, human remains from the Red Sea crossing. And then there I am. And no, that's not the 10 Commandments. That is actually a piece of petrified wood from Noah's Ark. And that is, that's what it kind of looks like. You got that ark underground. And, there's a lot of skepticism. A lot of people took that picture and, the dimension of that. And there's a lot of stuff that they found. But then certain ministries, and, I could say Answers in Genesis for one, they did a great thing. They built this replica of the ark. Fantastic. But they say, Ron Wyatt, he didn't have anything. That's not the real ark of Noah. That's not his real Noah's Ark. But, and I don't know why. I don't know why they don't support this. But what I do know is that just the last, I don't know if it was 2 or 3 years or 5 years, the last few years, there was a new scanning or some kind of scanning mechanism that they did at Noah's Ark. And they decided that with this new technology, they could actually scan the depth, because they found that the length and the width were the perfect dimensions to the Egyptian cubit in the writings of the scriptures. But the depth, the technology they had back in the 70s and 80s, they couldn't do that. And even the 90s and 2000s, they couldn't do that. Well, recently they got new technology. They did the scanning of the depth, and they actually found 3 layers, just as is written in the Torah, 3 different layers, the right dimensions. It's Noah's Ark. It's the exact same shape and size, length, height, width, depth, everything. And so that's why I believe wholeheartedly that is Noah's Ark. And again, here's another picture of that, petrified piece of wood. I mean, there's a screw in here somewhere too that you can see, they had iron and screws and stuff. This is a rivet, the same rivet, different side of it on the picture. It's iron. It was one of the rivets that they used to make Noah's Ark. It's not some kind of, made up fairy tale. That's Noah's Ark. That's the wood. That's the rivet. I mean, it's just mind blowing to hold in your hands. Well, I say hold in my hands Noah's Ark, but then this is even more mind blowing. You can see what I got in my hand there. That is my hand. It doesn't take a genius to figure that out. You got 3 bones. That is a pinky finger. At first, I thought maybe it's an index finger or a middle finger. And well, I found out it's the pinky finger. And it was a person that had to be, somewhere around maybe 12 foot tall, because, it's about twice as big as me. So I'm, almost 6 foot, somewhere around 11 or 12 foot would be this person. And apparently, this finger bone was dug up back in the 70s. The whole skeleton, everything was found. The jewelry sold on the black markets for like millions of dollars. And they believed from this inscription that was found on the tombstone, you can see the picture on the right is the inscription. You got the boat, you got the rainbow, and you got 8 people. Got, 6 little people. And then the second tallest one has her head pointed down. And what the archaeologists believe is that symbolized that was the second tallest one was Mrs. Noah, and that is Mrs. Noah's grave. You could take it for what it's worth, but my friends who are related to Ron White and friends of Ron White, they believe to this day, Kevin Fisher for one, Richard Reeves for another, people that know Ron still are friends with him. They believe that this is Noah's finger. And here's just another picture of it to see. It's just fantastic. I mean, that is a finger. And also it's not petrified either. I don't know what exactly the state of the bone is. I mean, it's like, 3,500 years old or whatever, or 4,400 years actually. So it's a really old bone. That's that. I mean, take it for what it's worth. Even if it happens not to be Mrs. Noah, it's at least a human finger bone that's really, really big. This is another huge item, and that is somebody's big toe. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. You don't want to get stepped on with that kind of toe. I mean, just the toe would break your foot. I don't know what the foot would do. It'd kill you probably. That is one big dude. And that's another thing that, I mean, it brings out quite a debate and quite a topic really, that a lot of people think that those giants were, the Nephilim, and they're all descendant of the devil or the fallen. Nephilim means falling or fallen in Hebrew. Historical, these bones here from Noah is that, maybe we all were taller. I mean, some of the Nephilim, they were taller too, but maybe we all were actually taller at one point in time. Evolution says we're getting taller and smarter and progressing. Well, maybe it's actually the other way around. Started out pretty tall, we're getting shorter. And here's another picture of me. Here is me at that was Sodom, okay? And you can see, I mean, I decided to wear white to Sodom. It was not the best idea, but I had a great time up on these ashes in Sodom. I actually was able to have an egg salad sandwich and orange pop at Sodom. It's probably the first time in forever that anybody had an egg salad sandwich in Sodom. But I decided to do that. Also, I mean, I have a picture there with me. I'm right next to what I think is a doorway. You got this, perfect doorway. You got the threshold and everything. I mean, it really looks like that was a building. That's the doorway. And I really believe that is a doorway in one of the buildings that used to be part of the ancient city of Sodom. Here again is a human remains that was found in Gomorrah, and there's somebody's hip bone. I mean, I never touched that artifact. I thought that was a little bit too delicate of a artifact to actually handle, but I got several pictures of that. And I threw that picture on just for what it's worth. That if you want to travel with me, got to realize that I know what I'm doing, but at the same time, I like to have fun. And the sign that said no climbing was not posted on that pillar or that little groove. So I climbed on it anyways. There was a sign that said no climbing, but it was around the corner and on something else. So I took it that they just didn't want you to climb there. You know, nobody told me otherwise. I mean, when I'm in Israel, I have fun. I've been poke fun with some of the signs. Like I was on a boat, waiting on a boat to get to Galilee. And I saw this sign. It says, jumping of is prohibited. I wasn't sure if that was like jumping of yourself or jumping of, you know, maybe jumping of Donald Trump is prohibited, but jumping of Nathaniel Kuetchenberg is okay. I wasn't sure if it was missing something or what, but then I looked and I saw that swimming was also prohibited. So I also thought, well, if you're swimming, it's probably okay. Just no swimming. And that's the way I took it. I didn't do either one, you know, swimming or swimming, but I just thought it was interesting. But I do like to see all the historical places. I like to have fun on my trip, and I like to educate people, especially like here at the Garden Tomb area. I like to educate people like, okay, that's Yeshua's tomb. Everybody goes there. It's, you know, the Protestant tomb. Everybody's going there. But what people don't know is there's that little iron rivet that was pounded in to seal the tomb. And the tour guides, they don't talk about it. I don't even think they're allowed to talk about it. I don't know why, but they never mention that. So I just, you know, I don't know how many people I showed, probably a couple dozen people over the last, you know, few years. I've showed a lot of people that just like, hey, look, that's the rivet. I'm taking a picture. Why don't you take a picture of it? Tell them what it was. A lot of people think it's really cool. They're like, hey, why didn't anybody else tell me about that? You know? So, I mean, there's me inside the tomb. It's a great place to be. You can go in the tomb if you go to Israel. A wonderful place, especially if it's not too busy. There's times that you could just stay in there for an hour or two, but other times when it's just too crowded, you only want to get there for a second or more. And then I'm right by the cutouts again. This is just the Garden Tomb area. I love the Garden Tomb. It's free. It doesn't cost you anything. You can just stay as long as you want. I mean, they'll kick you out for lunch and they can come back because they close down for an hour. That's Israel for you, all right? I mean, but it shows that this was the place. I mean, there's me and my friend again. There's the wine press. Another picture of the wine press. Another picture of the cutout. And you can see there's this little table and little benches and stuff like that. They went so far as to actually, you know, it used to have this little like canopy just in case like the sun was shining the wrong way so you get some shade. Well, now they ended up putting a whole roof and everything over it. Well, this is the area where Yeshua died on the cross. I mean, it's a little bit above the ground length of where Yeshua died on the cross, but that is the actual place. And I take it as disrespectful because, I mean, one of my friends, I mean, I don't know, you mean he's into, you know, movies of, I don't know how many of you heard about Joshua Aaron. He's a great, you know, singer in Israel. Well, one of my friends over in Israel, he's in one of the bands that he does music with Joshua Aaron sometimes. He's in one of his films too, you know, one of his YouTube videos got like 1 million some views. And he was over there. He was eating an egg salad sandwich or some kind of sandwich over where Yeshua died on the cross. And I just thought, you know, it's one thing to have an egg salad sandwich in a burnt city, Sodom and Gomorrah, but Yeshua died on the cross here. Like, can you show some respect? And I'm like, an egg salad sandwich? Really? But there's no size. It doesn't say this is where Yeshua died on the cross. You know, it says deck. And you're like, oh, what does that mean? The Garden Tomb people do not respect this place. They do not believe this is where Yeshua died on the cross. You can see in the picture I have up here on the screen, on that left side of it, there is a little crack in there. And I don't know if this is just part of the original or what, but a couple years ago, I was just, you know, messing around, kneeling down, praying there and fiddling around. I stuck my hand down in there. One of the gardener guys comes out and he says, he's a guy that actually knew who I was. Like, he knew my connections with Ron White and all that. And he says, well, y'all got to find the Ark of the Covenant in that crack, you know. And I'm like, what? He said, you can't find the ark in that crack. I'm like, are you kidding me? And he said, and then he starts mumbling and, it's British. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then he goes on and on. And then I just decided to play along. And I'm like, well, this crack's getting a little bigger, every day. Maybe I'll find the ark one day or another. But he was one of the guys in the Garden Tomb, and they don't believe in Ron Wyatt, so they always joke around with me in particular. And even last time I had one of the guys, I'm sitting there talking with a lady that knew about Ron Wyatt and wanted to know more, and we started talking. She's Israeli, from Ashkelon, so we're talking like, part English, part Hebrew. She was mainly talking Hebrew, and I was talking English, kind of going back and forth. And then he calls over, and he says, and I'm like, what? And then after, I'm like, well, what is he saying? I'm like, oh, wait, he says he remembers me. And then I asked her later, like, so wait, what did he say exactly in English? Like, he remembered, because I know Hebrew, but it's hard to retain like everything that he says at once, especially when you talk fast. So I'm like, what exactly did he say? And he's like, she said, oh, he remembers you. He didn't say anything bad or anything good. He just, he remembers you. Like, well, that's fantastic. I'm not there for like 6 months and he still remembers me. Actually, this was over a year. He still remembers me. So I'm like, well, I wonder what I did that really made him remember me, because, this guy had nothing to do with the cave experience. But anyway, you go to the Garden Tomb, there's a lot that you can find. And that's another thing I wanted to say, that, I like to just sit around, hang around, pray. There's a lot of people you can meet, people you could talk to about Yeshua's crucifixion, about the tomb. You could pray with, have communion. I had communion with a German fellowship. Just, join them. They talk German to me and I talk German back to them. It's just the German group. And then got these Israelis and then these Americans and all these people all the way around the world. But there was one day that I thought, you know what? I'm a little bit bored. Nobody was really there. It was an early morning. I just wake up and get to the tomb and I start praying, reading my Bible. And then I walk around the corner and go to a bench and I'm like, oh, that's nice. There's like, some old guy playing the violin and a couple guys playing the guitar. I'm like, I'll just sit back and, I'll just watch them. So I watched them. I thought, you know what, I might want to record this, get a video or a picture. And I was like, you know what? I don't even know these guys. I have no clue who these guys are. The guy playing the violin, he didn't even sound that good to me. And the singer, I'm like, I don't even know these guys, but the song, I recognized the song right away. He was doing something famous. And then I realized who it was. Not for another like day or so. There was actually Paul Wilbur and Don Moen. So that was just kind of a funny thing, because it was actually on Facebook the next day. I saw this picture that somebody, sent me. Hey, look, Don Moen is here. And I'm like, Don Moen? That's that guy I saw in the garden yesterday doing the violin. I was like, I wish I got a picture. I could have got a selfie with him. But you just never know who you're going to see. And, if you don't recognize somebody, he was Joe Schmo to me. So apparently he was actually there practicing. He had one guy in the back with an iPad. He took the picture that later got posted on Facebook. And I was the only one, just me and Don Moen and, Paul Wilbur and a couple guys sitting right there. I was literally like 8 feet away from Don Moen. And I thought that was kind of cool, but I had no idea who that was at the time. So back to this area. This is a sacred area. This is where Yeshua died on the cross. I have another picture on the screen that this was a plug of some sorts. They set this on top of the cross hole, where, the hole in the ground, that they set the cross in, the wooden cross, and they put it there. They put this plug on top, and they did that so that the erosion and all that wouldn't wear it away. And there's me holding it. It's a pretty heavy piece of rock. It's heavy. There's, me with it just by itself. And if you want to see this, let me say it how Richard Reeves said it. It's in an undisclosed location. And I was like, yeah, right, Richard's in an undisclosed location. Well, he has in his museum for public display in Cornersville, Tennessee. Go to Cornersville, Tennessee. He's got on display a replica of this stone, and it looks exactly like that stone. I couldn't tell the difference, really. So if you want to see a replica of it, you can go to Cornersville, Tennessee, or you could just see the picture right here. And you may have seen this picture. I know Michael Rood, he promotes it. I'm not sure about Henry Groover. I know Richard Reeves, bless his little heart. No disrespect to Richard Reeves, but he just doesn't get things sometimes. That Ron Wyatt had posted this picture in an article back in like the 80s or something. He said that there was a crack and explained the crack, and that there was, the cross was placed here. And he had this picture. And the reason he put that picture opposed to a different picture is because the picture he took of where the cross hole really was, it didn't develop right. This is back like the 80s or something. Photography wasn't the same. So he decided that was, the best. He wanted to show there was a crack, and then he wanted to talk about the picture. He didn't say that was the place that the cross was placed, but Richard, 10 years later, he claimed, well, I was his best friend. And he said that was the place where the cross was. And this is where I found. And so then that's why I go to my next slide. And I have this crossed out. This is not the cross hole. This is not the place that Yeshua would put, the Yeshua's cross was. It's not even a cross hole. I mean, you can almost make it look like it from the, from this picture with saying, oh, the square hole and oh, the crack. It's not. And I mean, I'm glad that he thought it was, because what he wanted to do, he's like, well, if this is this crack that goes down to the Ark of the Covenant, I got this great idea. What I want to do is I want to get a bottle of water. Actually, I want to get some kind of hose and like try to spray water and get it down so it goes down this crack and we can tell that the Ark of the Covenant. And I don't know what exactly he had in mind, but anyway, he tried to do it there and the water just trickled out. It didn't go into the ground. There is no crack there. But, and now this was another guy that was, a friend of mine that was there at the time. And he tells me, he's like, I was there well, actually the friend of a friend. But I know this other guy too. He's like, he was there and it was going down another crack right next to it. It was just gushing down there, which would be the actual hole where the cross was. It was gushing down there, but then this one, it wasn't. So, sorry, Richard Reeves. He did do a lot of good research, but there's some things he's still a little bit slow on. So you just gotta forgive him for some of that stuff. This is a lamp that was found, and I had the information. I thought that was found like by the cross hole, but I'm actually thinking this might be the one of the 3 lamps or one of 7. I don't get this right. Don't quote me on it, but this was one of the lamps that I believe was taken. It was actually taken from the chamber of the Ark of the Covenant. So this lamp, as long as I got my story right, and this was actually from where the Ark of the Covenant was. So that lamp would date back to the time of Moses, if I got my story right. And again, not quite sure about that. This is me on the Dome of the Spirits, and that is where I believe most likely is where the Ark of the Covenant was back a few thousand years ago. And that's why the flooring is different. There's a lot of people that try to say that's where it was. There might have been some kind of, maybe a hydraulic system or something that made the Ark of the Covenant go down into a chamber, go to where it's at. We don't know the details. But anyway, this is another just picture of me. Mostly picture from quite a few years ago. I've gone with my brother. I've gone with some friends since then. Right now I just had these old pictures to show forth.
Nathaniel, you will find it very interesting to go and see a interview we hosted a few days ago with Rico Cortez on his investigations on the Temple Mount and the location of the Second Temple. If anybody else is interested in this topic, I encourage anybody to check out that interview with Rico Cortez we had a couple days ago, because I with your just love for this information, I think you will greatly enjoy that. He had some very interesting presentations and graphics that really demonstrated some stuff that is rocking the current status quo in regards to the location of the temple and where the Holy of Holies was and all that kind of stuff. So I'd encourage you to watch that, Nathan, and anybody else there who would want to see that. But just some really cool information I learned just this week myself. So I'd say check out that. I believe it was called The Treasures of the Temple with Rico Cortez.
Yeah, that definitely sounds interesting. Of course, I mean, for me, I got a lot of information myself, but I am always a student. I'm always learning. I never pretend like I know everything. I think if you do that, you're going to stumble and fall somewhere or another. I let people know what I feel like. I'm confident and say I know, but I mean, some things I don't know. And yeah, I'll definitely look into that. Thank you for mentioning that. I only have a few more things about the Ark. Last thing is just the passage to the Ark. There was a chiseled mark and there was a cherub that got chiseled out. You can see that. They took it to some British museum in England. And I really believe that this is a huge part of these end times, that it says in Daniel 9:27 that he, which, you know, some people try to say that he's the Antichrist. I really don't believe that. If you take it grammatically, he is Mashiach, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. It says, and it literally means that he's going to make this covenant. He's going to confirm this 1-7 for 7 years, I believe. And I mean, I would say that it could happen as soon as this year, but this, I believe, is the next thing on the prophetic time clock that we're looking for. Again, okay, here's another picture just showing the evidence of, you know, Ron Wyatt says this story. He said that when he was going down, he was getting ready to find the Ark of the Covenant, going through this tunnel. He said he broke off a stalactite and he breaks it off. He goes into the chamber and sees the Ark of the Covenant. Well, here's a stalactite. So, you know, a lot of people can make up stories, but some people just try to say that Ron Wyatt, he just made up a bunch of stuff. Well, is one thing to make up a bunch of stuff, another thing to have the stalactite that you supposedly just made up. I believe it was a real stalactite and a real Ark of the Covenant. And I mean, here's another picture of a wall in Zedekiah's cave, and then, you know, me with a replica of the Ark of the Covenant. You know, I mean, that's not the wall where the Ark of the Covenant is or anything like that, but there is a wall, a man-made wall in the cave, Zedekiah's. And I really believe, you know, it's at the right time, at the right moment, Yehovah, Almighty God, will reveal this and let these end times come to pass. And I thought it was really interesting. I want to bring this up. I mean, the Gospel of Philip, I know the Council of Nicaea completely threw it out, said it was terrible and everything. There's some misconceptions, a lot of studying I want to do, just, you know, trying to figure this out. But regardless of whether or not, you know, what the Gospel of Philip was all about, this verse kind of intrigued me, because when I was reading through it, I mean, it says the veil of the temple indeed at first concealed how God governs the creation. Yet once the veil was torn and the things within were revealed, then his house was to be forsaken and desolate, yet moreover to be destroyed. Yet the entire divinity was to depart from these places, not within the Holy of Holies, for it was not able to unite with the light, nor unite with the flawless fullness, but rather it was to be under the wings of the cross and in its arms. The ark shall be salvation for us when the cataclysm of water has overwhelmed them. And I have the Greek too, some of the text. I mean, this translation is not altogether the best. I looked at the original Greek. I just copied and pasted this for demonstrative purposes, whatever. The key fact is when it says here, it says that the ark, it says it's under the wings of the cross. And I mean, this is, you know, got the cross, the wings of the cross would be, you know, the left and right hand side underneath. And it says right there, it says, but rather it was under the wings of the cross. And this is the ark shall be the salvation. Whatever it means with the, you know, the water and the desolation, some of that's kind of a weird translation of it. Regardless, the main point of bringing this up is just that it says here that the ark is underneath where the cross was. This is another note that is, I mean, just kind of fascinating too, that I got this note. It was a question I sent into the Temple Institute about the Ark of the Covenant quite a few years ago. And this is the reply that I got. He says, Nathaniel, the Ark is hidden, not lost. We know exactly where it is, and when the time is right, it will be retrieved. It is hidden here in Jerusalem. The only issue is the timing. You ask when the specific timing will be. This is my answer. When the people of Israel are ready to build the temple, which is our goal, towards which we are working without cease. Shalom, Rabbi Chaim Richmond. And for those of you that aren't aware, Chaim Richmond, he's one of the leading rabbis in Israel at the Temple Institute. And I mean, he ought to know what he's talking about. So here's again another picture of Yerushalayim, the holy city, Yom Kodesh. And that is the end of my PowerPoint and the end of my presentation for now.
All right. Well, Nathaniel, that, what a fascinating journey you're on right now, and you're going to continue to go on as you study these things out, and you progress in your next version of the book that you're going to come out with this year sometime. And it's just exciting. It's so awesome to finally get your story out and to get to hear that, really going into detail on your adventures in Israel and your just passion for that place and biblical history and the language. Well-rounded is what's coming to my mind in terms of you got it all going for you, man. You're chasing after the word, you're going after the archaeology, and so really I'm just wondering what's next in terms of what are you looking forward to adventure wise. What do you want to go and see if you can discover, or where do you want to go and what do you want to do this in the future?
Yeah. Okay. So I brought a little bit of show and tell, and hopefully I won't make a mess of this. I've shown a lot of people some of these ashes and stuff from Gomorrah and Sodom. And one time I was in a Pizza Hut, spilled ashes all over the carpet. And one time, get that story in a second. So anyways, hopefully I don't make a mess or anything. So anyways, here I put it on the screen. This is a piece of Sodom. Okay. That little building I was standing on top of, just down the road a little ways, down the street, around the corner, as we were driving out. I got this, I put it in a shoebox. A lot of it fell off. A lot of it is very crumbly. I got this on the airplane. Nobody asked any questions. And I would say Sodom and Gomorrah both. There's a lot of stuff that could be done there. There's a lot of sulfur, a lot of research is yet to be done. And it's something that's untouched. The Israeli antiquities don't do anything. You got little pieces here, a little sulfur, brimstone and ashes and stuff. And I mean, one time too, I shared one of these with my friends, and I was like, "Hey, look, this is a piece of Sodom and Gomorrah," and one of the friends took it and plopped it in her mouth, like a 45-year-old lady. I'm like, "What in the world are you thinking?" But no, she's like, "Yeah, I'll plop it in my mouth. I thought it was a cookie." I'm like, "No, that ain't a cookie." Well, that's part of Josephus. It says that these cities of plain, Sodom and Gomorrah, are still to this day. They're places, they're real. I mean, I'm paraphrasing Josephus, and he says that that the ashes look like fruits fit to be eaten. And I didn't know what that meant until my friend wanted to plop one of these little things in her mouth. So again, I mean, there's ashes from Sodom and Gomorrah. And what I would like to do with Sodom and Gomorrah, this is just a rock from Sodom. What I'd like to do is just, map it out, try to recreate a possibility, what the city looked like. You could do something on animation, make a CGI.
Nathaniel, do you have a lighter with you? Do you guys have a lighter?
Yeah.
Are those able to be ignited? I know.
I have a small little piece I could ignite. Yeah.
That would be crazy to see that. And that would be really cool. We will try our hardest not to burn down the Now You See TV office. But it would be so cool to have a piece of Sodom and Gomorrah lit on fire. That would be sweet. I don't have a lighter.
Might be my coat. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
We can go on for a little bit.
Crazy. I'm really excited. This is awesome. We're gonna see if we can get see if this brimstone and light it on fire. Well, you know what, Nathaniel? If you can't find it, that's all right. We'll have to do a little demonstration of that some other time. Um, yeah. Well, we can't find a lighters, ladies and gentlemen. So we'll have to get a. Well, and you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, that was an awful idea because we have sprinklers in this room. So yeah, we probably shouldn't be doing that. I'm sorry, John. I know he's probably watching tonight and going, "No, don't do it." We have sprinklers going. Anyways, continue telling us some more about your stuff you got.
Yeah, let's see. Do you have a way to play a video of me lighting it if I have?
Yeah, you're gonna have to close your full screen there on the computer on your PowerPoint. And if you play it, we might be able to watch straight onto there. But yeah, while you're looking up that, Nathaniel,
Yeah, sure.
I'm going to go ahead and ask you some questions from the chat. We're going a little bit long tonight, so I'd like to go ahead and get these questions out while you're looking for that video, and we can show people.
Go ahead, get me started.
So we got a question from Valerie. What is your opinion on the ISR 2009 translation? Have you heard of that?
ISR. No, what does that stand for?
Let me just look this up real quick for you so we can see if we can get an answer for ISR 2009 Bible. All right, so that is the Scriptures translation. Have you heard of the Scriptures? I think it's a messianic translation called the Scriptures.
I've heard about it. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, the thing is, if you don't know Hebrew and Greek, what are you going to do? You got to read some kind of translation. I would just try to do your best to find a literal translation. I would say it's probably pretty close, but I mean, I wouldn't trust it on everything.
Yeah, and then of course every translation has its errors, and there's always discrepancy. I understand that there's even like copyright issues, like they can't even translate. If it's way literal, if another translation has already got that literal translation, copyright laws would prohibit them from doing over, I think, like 500 words in a row, or something like that. So yeah, I've heard of the Scriptures translation. I know a lot of people who really like it. And of course, some translations are way better than others, like the non-inspired version, NIV. Some people, have issues because it doesn't have certain verses that are omitted, and also they're translated from very poor manuscripts like the Sinaitica. But of course, it's better to read a Bible, any Bible, than not read a Bible. So I would just recommend that. So whatever.
Just do the best you can with what you got. I mean, there's a lot of English translations. Most of them, they're not that different. If you see one and they translate the Jews as hands, I mean, that's a little obscure, kind of weird. But okay, I've got a question. Are you able to play a video on my screen if it's on YouTube?
Yeah.
Okay, so I got it ready. This is myself burning.
You're gonna have to minimize your PowerPoint real quick there,
okay.
Nathaniel.
And then afterward, I'll show you that. I mean, I have this that I'm demonstrating me burning it, but I still have this piece, which is a small little section, just so nobody thinks. I mean, I had this wonderful piece and I just burned it. Okay.
All right, let's see it.
Is this minimized good enough?
Yeah. You can just go ahead and play it there.
Okay. Okay. So here's myself with a little piece.
Narrate for this because we don't get the audio.
Yeah. So there's no sound, I guess. Right now. So basically, I lit this in my house, and now I had to go outside because it was kind of toxic. It was stinking up the whole place. I mean, I did breathe it in just because I wanted to smell what it smelled like. I mean, I'm not suggesting everybody just goes breathes in a bunch of this stuff. But anyways, there it is.
Wow, look at
You can
that.
see the blue flame. That is the way it looked. It is crazy. And it burnt the whole little piece up. I mean, I only had a tiny little piece there, but that is what the flame looked like. It was a goo. It was kind of gross. It was kind of blue, hot. And you can see it just kind of shriveled up a little bit, got smaller and smaller. And yeah, I said it kind of looked like Michael Rood, but I mean, he didn't have anything to do with that, but.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you for showing us.
But yeah, I mean, now I can show you that piece. I mean, I still have it here that I just took off a teeny tiny little piece, but I still have it here. Still have the little piece of sulfur inside. Got another piece here of another little piece with some sulfur inside. I've done a few other demonstrations. Like if I did want to do something like that on this show, I'd probably just, carve off a teeny tiny little bit of that and put it on fire. Maybe another time, another place, even like, outside or something. So yeah, that would be,
yeah.
That.
All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the next question.
Sure.
Coming in, Alishiba asked to Nathaniel, did you see the research from the 80s where they dug deep into the structure, which I know is Noah's Ark, I don't care who doubts it, and found petrified animal dung from every animal species? This made mainstream media, they did. If this doesn't drop the mic, then what does? Have you heard about that research from the 80s?
I've heard about, a lot of stuff they found in this place of Noah's Ark. Like it was cat fur and antlers and just a bunch of stuff. I mean, they found it there. I don't know about the specifics, but yeah, I mean, I think it proves to be Noah's Ark because you could find a little bit of everything just showing that's the place where Noah was. I mean, including the skeleton of Mrs. Noah. And if you want to see Noah, that's in the future too, because I mean, to tell a little secret, Noah's skeleton's still there. It's never been touched and it's still buried. I don't know where it's at, but I know that it's there and my friends say they know where it's at. So someday in the future, that's going to get revealed. And I think that'll be pretty cool.
Very awesome. She also asked, did you see the anchor stones they found nearby? Have they moved them?
Oh, I've never seen an anchor stones. No, because those are all in Turkey. I'd love to go to Turkey sometime. But that's another story. I don't speak Arabic. All I could say is in a Mubarak Arabi. I don't speak Arabic. Okay. Hebrew's not going to do me any good. German's not going to be doing me any good. Not even English, really. So I'd love to go there. Maybe with somebody that knows Arabic. Maybe if somebody knows what they're doing. But I've never gone there.
Awesome. Next question is, can you ask Nathan if he's ever used or looked at worldslastchance.com creator's calendar? It's a lunar solar calendar, and they figured out that on the biblical calendar, the Sabbath always lands on the 7th day, which is the 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th. So I guess the question is, how do you calculate the calendar, and what are your opinions on the various calendars out there?
Okay, yeah, I know a little bit about different calendars. Some people try to say something's Enoch's calendar, that's somebody else's calendar. I understand there's differences. I think that the way the Jewish people have kept it, they haven't changed. That, I mean, the day always starts at darkness. The Erev was first, and then Boker, evening, then morning, dark, then light. And that every time you sight the new moon, it's a new day. I've heard a little bit of everything that, I mean, different theories of, maybe it's the darkness instead of the light of the moon, and maybe it's this and that. I understand they're out there. And I mean, I'm not going to beat anybody up over it, but I believe it's that when you sight the new moon in the sky, that's the new month. When the barley's ripe, that's the new year. And when the sun goes down, that's the new day. And then the Sabbath is, your 7th day of rest, which is Saturday, Friday night to Saturday night. That's what I use in the text.
With this topic on calendars, we get a lot of questions all the time because there are a lot of opinions out there. But I think the most important thing is that people are desiring to keep the feast. They're desiring to keep the biblical months and the Sabbath. And while, we're still trying to figure it out, we're not going to be set straight until either the witnesses, educate us further, or the Messiah comes back and sets us all straight. But the importance is that we're pursuing after it. We're trying to obey to the best of our ability and knowledge. And we're not saying that's for the Jews or that's for only, the ancient peoples and we're separate from them. Instead, as believers, we're seeking into these things. We're trying to get on God's calendar and not our Gregorian pagan calendar that has nothing to do with Scripture at all. It's just, in fact, what Rome basically implemented. And so, with this calendar topic, there are many opinions out there, but very steadfastly study out and keep the word. The commandment is to keep the feasts, to keep the Sabbath, and so you got to do your own research and come to your own conclusions on that topic. So yeah, that's my opinion on that, at least.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're gonna ask another question. Have you ever looked at, actually, I take that back. That's a, okay, here, it's been able to prove, okay, so it was another question on the calendar. I just double pasted it, so I apologize. But with that, that's the last question we have tonight. This is the longest episode we've had for quite some time. So I want you to go ahead and give where people can find your book, get in contact with you. You have a YouTube channel I'd like you to tell us about. So if you'd go ahead and jump into that.
Yeah. So, thank you very much for having me. It's my second time. If you guys see me on that Flat Earth video, Flat Earth had nothing to do with this study. So whether or not you believe in that, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, I do have my own YouTube channel. It's gone up quite a bit lately. I started it a few years ago, just little. And lately I've gotten a few videos. With, one with 74,000 views, another with 130,000. So I take that as a good sign, and I'm hoping to promote as much of the accurate gospel as possible. So yeah, the link should be in the description. I have it Never Ending Adventures TV and Vlogs, and I try to upload as often as I can and keep all that up to date. And as far as a book right now, the only edition I have available is the first edition of the book called As Jesus Walked. And again, I've changed it now. I'm using the word Yeshua for the translation, but if you want to, fight me over that, Jesus and Yeshua, Jesus, you can always just look at the word Jesus and read Yeshua. It's the same thing. So that is available on Amazon. I would suggest to order from me because you never know who the other side person is and if it's ever going to show up. So if it says Nathanael Kuetchenberg, that's me. I have about 100 and so many available. Just you can order it till it runs out. And I'm not trying to make a lot of money off it either. I think it's up there. I don't know if it's $17 or $18. That's the cost it took me to print it, basically. And some people, they try to have their $100 book or their $50 book. I'm not doing that. I want the gospel to be out there. I want people to read it and get the information. And hopefully I'll be back later. I could talk about more things and get into further detail in different areas.
Yeah, absolutely. And for your YouTube channel, what would people search for to find you on YouTube?
You could just search my name. If you just put Nathanael Kuetchenberg, if you could spell that is, but just put Kuechenberg and it'll show up. One of my cousins, though, the famous football player, will also show up. But right now, even though he was a football player for the Miami Dolphins on YouTube, I'm coming first. So I take that as a good sign.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Nathaniel, for coming on Now You See TV. Fascinating episode and interview. I really enjoyed having you on, and we look forward to partnering with you in the future to go with you on some of your adventures, possibly maybe go over to Israel and you can show us around, and also looking forward to your new edition of the book.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for having me, and I hope to be back later. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, with that, everybody, thank you for watching Now You See TV, and shalom.